You're about to learn some of the most useful vocabulary for IELTS writing and speaking. In this video, we're going to look at Band 7 plus words, idioms, phrasal verbs, and synonyms, the type of language that can improve your vocabulary score. You're going to see which words you should avoid, how to replace them with better words, and how to use high-level vocabulary naturally in your answers. And to finish off, there'll be a quick vocabulary quiz to test your level. So if you're ready to boost your IELTS vocabulary, let's get started. Now, the word advocate is a verb, and it simply means to strongly support or recommend something. Now, some synonyms are recommend, support, and promote. And here are some collocations. Advocate for something, advocate against something. And we're going to have a look at how to use both of those right now. So here's the first example. Many researchers advocate for using renewable energy solutions to address global warming. So in this sentence, we're saying using renewable energy is good. That's what advocate for means. It means we think that thing is good. Now, on the other hand, look at this sentence. Many environmentalists advocate against the use of plastic bags to reduce pollution. So in this sentence, we're saying using plastic bags is not good. So you can see that we can use advocate in two different ways. We can use it to support something and say it's good, and we can also use it to say that we think something is not good and we don't support it. So advocate is a great word to use in task 2 when you want to show that you support something or you don't support something. Now here's the second one, alleviate. Alleviate is also a verb, and it simply means to make a problem less bad. Here are some synonyms: reduce, ease, and relieve. And here are some collocations: alleviate a problem, alleviate stress, and alleviate pain. So in all of these collocations, it simply means we're reducing that thing, we're making that thing or that problem less bad. Here's an example. More public transports can help alleviate traffic congestion in big cities. So what we're saying is, if we have more public transport, it's going to help reduce the traffic problems in big cities. Exercise not only strengthens the cardiovascular system, the cardiovascular system is talking about your heart, but it can also alleviate stress and improve mental health. So we're simply saying that exercise can reduce stress. So alleviate is a great word to use when you want to say something is less bad. Instead of just saying reduce stress or reduce traffic congestion, you could say alleviate stress or alleviate traffic congestion. Moving on to the third word now, which is repercussion. Repercussion. This is a great word and it's a noun. It simply means a negative result or effect of an action or decision. And that's really important to remember. Repercussion is talking about a negative result. Here are some synonyms: effect, consequence, and impact. Some collocations are serious repercussion. So this simply means a serious or a strong negative result. Long-term repercussion, economic repercussions. Here's an example. Skipping school can have serious repercussions on a student's future. So this simply means that if students skip school, if they don't go to school, this can have big negative effects for them. Not following health guidelines can have dangerous repercussions for people. So this simply means that the effects will be dangerous. They could be harmful. They could hurt someone. So repercussion is a great word to use when you're talking about a negative effect. Remember, when you're using repercussion, it must be about something negative. Number 4, obstacle. Obstacle is a noun, and it means something that makes it difficult to do something. Some synonyms are challenge, difficulty, or barrier. Some common collocations are a major obstacle. Major means big or serious. To face an obstacle, overcome an obstacle. Here's an example. Financial problems can be a major obstacle for those who are looking to pursue tertiary education. Now, tertiary education simply means university education. So in this sentence, we're saying that not having enough money can make it difficult for people who want to go to university and study at university. Here's a second example. An obstacle that a lot of young people face when finding a job is a lack of experience. So we're saying here that a problem, a challenge that a lot of young people face is not having enough experience. So obstacle is a great word to use when there is a difficulty or when something is really hard to do. It's a really great word to use when you're talking about a problem. Moving on to number 5 now, inevitable. Inevitable. Now, inevitable is an adjective, and it simply means something that will happen at some point in the future. So it will happen, but we don't know when it will happen. It might happen next week, it might happen next month, or it might happen next year. Some synonyms are certain, expected, and unavoidable. Some common collocations are an inevitable consequence. So this simply means a consequence or an effect that will happen. And another collocation is an inevitable result. So here's the first example. With the rise of automation and AI, job losses in some industries are inevitable. So that means there will be some job losses in some industries. We don't know when it will happen. It could happen in a year, it could happen in 5 years, but it will happen. Moving on to the second one, climate change is an inevitable consequence of all of the pollution being created by humans. So this simply means climate change will happen no matter what. So inevitable is a great word to use when you're talking about something that will happen. Instead of saying it will happen, you can sometimes use the word inevitable. Moving on to number 6 now, which is widespread. This is an adjective, and it means something that happens in many places or something that affects many people. Here are some synonyms: common, global, popular. Some collocations are widespread belief, widespread impact, and widespread use. So for example, a widespread belief, that simply means a belief that happens in many places or something that affects many people. Here's an example. The widespread use of social media has revolutionized how we communicate in the modern world. So that simply means that social media is everywhere. It is happening in many, many places. It is being used in many, many places. There is widespread concern about the amount of people who are overweight and unhealthy. Concern simply means a worry. So that means that many people are worried because a lot of people in the world now are overweight. So widespread is a great word to use if you're talking about something like a problem or a thing that is common in many different places. The next one is stem from. This is a great phrase to use, and it's a phrasal verb. Now, stem from simply means to come from or to be caused by something. So here are some synonyms: come from, result from, or be caused by. And here are some collocations: stem from a problem. So this means come from a problem. Stem from a lack of something. So this would mean to come from a lack of something. For example, stress and anxiety in the modern world today often stem from poor diet and lack of exercise. So this simply means that stress and anxiety normally come from not eating well and not exercising enough. I would argue that a lot of social problems stem from a lack of education. So in this sentence, the person is giving their opinion and they're using the word stem from to say where something comes from. So instead of just using the phrase come from, try using the phrasal verb stem from. It's going to make your writing sound very professional and more like a native speaker. Moving on to number 8 now, controversial. Controversial. This is an adjective, and it means something that causes strong opinions or disagreements. And that's the key thing there. Something that's controversial causes really strong opinions. Now, here are some synonyms: debatable and problematic. Here are some collocations: a controversial topic. So this means a topic that causes strong opinions. A controversial figure. This means a controversial person. So if someone is controversial, that means some people like him or her, and some people don't like that person. That person causes strong opinions. And finally, a controversial law. Now let's have a look at some examples. Social media censorship is a controversial issue and people have strong opinions about it. So this just means exactly what it says. People have strong opinions about this issue or about this topic. Although some people believe in using animals for scientific experiments, it still remains a controversial topic. So just think about this topic. Just think about using animals for scientific experiments. Some people have really strong opinions about this, and that's why we can say it's a controversial topic. So controversial is a great word you can use when you're talking about topics or things or issues which people have strong opinions on. Moving on to number 9, the second last word, initiative. Now, initiative is a noun and it means a new plan or action to fix or solve a problem or to improve something. Some synonyms are a plan, a project, a program, or a strategy. Here are some collocations. Government initiative. So this simply means a government plan or action. Environmental initiative. Major initiative. So a major initiative would mean a big plan or a big strategy. Many governments around the world are proposing initiatives that reduce energy use. So this simply means many governments are coming up with or they are thinking about plans or strategies that would help to reduce energy use. Companies are investing in green initiatives to reduce their impact on the environment. So a green initiative is referring to the environment. So it's a plan or a strategy or a project that's probably going to help the environment in some way. So initiative is a great noun you can use when you're talking about a new plan or a strategy to solve a problem. Now, please note that initiative is normally used with governments or companies rather than individuals or people like you and me. Now, when a government or a company starts an initiative, they need to take action to make it happen. And when they do this, we can use the word implement. And that is the next word we're going to look at, implement. Implement is a verb and it means to start using a plan, law, or strategy to make something happen. Here are some synonyms: start, put into action, and introduce. Here are some collocations: implement and initiative. So we've already talked about initiative. That just means to start using an initiative. Successfully implement. That means you start using a plan successfully. You have positive results. Difficult to implement. Now let's have a look at some examples. Many schools have implemented initiatives that ban students from using their mobile phones in the classroom. So this simply means that many schools have started using plans or strategies, and these plans or strategies ban students from using their phones in the classroom. They can't use their phones in the classroom. Schools that can successfully implement online learning programs will improve the accessibility of remote learning. So implement is a great word to use when you're saying that a plan or strategy is put into action. So the first word is plummet, which is a verb. Now plummet means to fall very quickly or very suddenly. Here are some synonyms: decrease sharply, fall rapidly, and decline steeply. So have a look at this chart on the right-hand side of the screen now. You can see at the end of the period, there's a big drop. So that's where we can use plummet. So here's an example. Tourist numbers plummeted in 2020 to 18 million. Alternatively, you could say something like the number of international visitors plummeted from 40 million in 2019 to just 18 million in 2020. So plummet is a great word to use if there's a really big drop. And remember, most of the time it's used as a verb. All right, let's move on to word number 2 now, which is soar. Now, soar is also a verb, and it has the opposite meaning of plummet. It means to rise very, very quickly. Now, here are some synonyms: increase rapidly, or rise quickly, or rise sharply. So again, have a look at this chart on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see in April, things start to change. There's a really big increase. So that's where we can use the word soar. So for example, we could say the price of petrol soared in May, rising from $1.20 to $1.75 per litre. And note here how we have ed after soar because we're using soar in the past tense. Now here's another example. Fuel costs soared in May and hit a new high for the year. So soar is a great word to use if there's a very big increase. Okay, let's have a look at word number 3 now, which is fluctuate. Now, fluctuate is a verb and it means to go up and down irregularly. Here are some synonyms: vary or change. And here are some collocations: fluctuate significantly, slight fluctuation. Note here how we have changed fluctuate as a verb into a noun, fluctuation. And the last collocation is fluctuate over time. So let's have a look at this chart. As you can see, the numbers went up, down, and then up at the end. So this is a great example of when we can use fluctuate. Here is an example. Electricity consumption fluctuated significantly over the 6-month period. And again, note here how we've got ed because we're using fluctuate in the past. This data is from the past. And here is another example. From January to June, the figures fluctuated. So fluctuate is a great word to use to describe a chart or a situation when the numbers go up and down. Okay, let's look at the 4th word now, which is gradually. Now, gradually is an adverb, and you should be able to see that because it's got ly on the end. Now, gradually means slowly and steadily over time. Here are some synonyms: slowly and little by little. And here are some collocations. You can say verb plus gradually. So for example, increased gradually. You can say a or an plus gradual plus noun. So you can see here for this second collocation, we're not using ly because we're using gradually as a noun. So we could say something like a gradual increase. Now have a look at this chart on the right-hand side of the screen, and you'll see that the numbers, they slowly go up over time. There are no really big increases or big jumps. So this is where we could use gradually. The figures increased gradually over the 6-month period. And finally, online course usage grew gradually each month, showing an upward trend. So that simply means that online course usage grew slowly, little by little. So gradually is a great word to use when you've got a change which is slow. Now, please remember that for gradually, you can use it for when there's an increase, and you can also use it when there's a decrease. Moving on to the next piece of vocabulary, which is remain steady. Now, remain steady is a verb phrase, and it means to stay the same without big changes. And that's the key there. It stays the same without big changes. So that means there can be small changes. And if there are small changes, you can still use remain steady. And we're going to have a look at an example in just a second. Now, here are some synonyms: stay consistent, stay the same, and remain unchanged. So have a look at this chart right here. You can see that the numbers are almost the same every month, but there are very small changes. So for example, in January, it looks like the number's around 197, but in February, the number's 200. So they're very, very similar, but they're not exactly the same. So this is a great example of where we can use remain steady. And here is an example. The number of employees remained steady at around 200 from January to June. So sometimes the number was a little bit less than 200, and sometimes it was a little bit more. And here's one more example. Despite minor fluctuations, staff levels remained steady. So this is simply saying, yes, there were small ups and downs, but over the period, the numbers stayed pretty much the same. So remain steady is a great verb phrase you can use when the numbers stay the same, even if there are some very small changes. Let's move on to the next word now, which is peak. Now, peak can be a verb and it can also be a noun. Now, if it's a verb, peak means to reach the highest point or to get to the highest point. Now, if it's a noun, it means the highest point, the biggest number, the highest number. So here are some synonyms: reach a high or high point. And here are some collocations: peak at, number. So you could say peak at $100. The next one, reach a peak of, and then number. So you could say reach a peak of 1,000 sales. Or finally, the last collocation is hit a peak. So have a look at this chart now. You can see that in May, mobile phone sales were at the highest number. And it looks like they're at about 11,000 or just a little bit less. So here's an example. The company's sales reached a peak in May. So you can see that in this sentence, we're using peak as a noun. Here's the next one. We're using peak as a verb in this sentence. Sales peaked in May at 11,000 units before dropping in June. Now note here that when we're using peak as a verb, you still need to think about the tense. In this case, we're talking about the past, and that's why we've had to add ed at the end of peak. So peak is a great word to use when you're talking about the highest number, and that's normally an important feature when you're describing data in writing task 1. Let's look at word number 7 now, which is not a verb and it's not a noun. It is a conjunction. The word is whereas. Now, whereas is used to show a contrast or a difference between two things. Here are some synonyms: while, in contrast, or on the other hand. Now, please note that if you're using on the other hand, you would normally use that to start a new sentence. But with whereas, we normally put it in the middle of a sentence. So have a look at this chart on the right now. You see that it's about male and female participation in two different things. And as you can see, the blue bars, which are about the males, are very different to the females. So this is a great opportunity for us to use whereas. And here's the first example. 750 females enrolled in university, whereas male enrollment was 500. So we're simply using whereas to show that the two numbers were different. Here's another example. Male enrollment in vocational courses was 700, whereas the figure for females was much lower at around 200. So again, we're using this word to show that there is a difference, there is a contrast. So whereas is a great word to use when you want to talk about two different pieces of data or information that are different. Moving on to word number 8 now, which is decline. Now, decline can be used as a verb and a noun, and it means simply to go down. So here are some synonyms: decrease, drop, and fall. Here are some collocations: decline plus adverb, so you could say decline sharply. Now, if you're using decline as a noun, you could say something like an plus adjective plus decline. So you could say a sharp decline. And the final collocation is decline in something. So for example, a decline in numbers. So let's have a look at this chart right here. As you can see, the number of newspaper readers is clearly going down. It's decreasing. So we can use decline here. The figures declined steadily from 5.5 million in 2015 to 3 million in 2020. So we're simply saying that the numbers went down. And here's another one. We're using decline as a noun here. There was a decline in numbers over the 5-year period. So that simply means there was a drop or a decrease in numbers. So decline is a great word you can use to describe some data or information that has a downward trend, and it just sounds a bit more professional than simply saying went down. Let's have a look at word number 9 now, which is proportion. Now, proportion is a noun, and it means a part or a share of a total amount, and it's normally a percentage. So here are some synonyms: percentage and share. Here are some collocations: a large or small proportion. So that would simply mean a large part or a small part. And you could also say the proportion of something. So for example, the proportion of sales. So let's have a look at this chart or this pie chart on the right here. And you see it's talking about daily activities for adults. So just quickly pause the video and think about how could you use proportion here? Well, if you had a chance to think about it, you could say something like this. The proportion of time spent on leisure activities was just 20%. So this simply means the part or the share of time that was spent on leisure activities was 20%. Here's another example. A large proportion of time was spent on work, which accounted for 40% of the total. So again, this simply means a large part of time was ... Proportion is a great word to use when you're talking about the percentage of something, and it's normally used when you're writing about pie charts. Okay, let's move on to word number 10, which is marginal. Now, marginal is an adjective, and it means very small, very, very small. So here are some synonyms. We got slight, minimal, and small. Here are some collocations: a marginal increase or a marginal decrease. So that means a very small increase or decrease. Or alternatively, you could use marginal as an adverb by simply adding ly. So you could say verb plus marginally. So you could say something like dropped marginally. So let's have a look at this chart on the right here, and you see that it's about the number of gym memberships. The numbers went up very slowly. You can see it's a very small increase. So this is a great example of where we can use marginal. Here is an example. There was a marginal increase. So we're using marginal as an adjective here. A marginal increase in gym memberships from January to June. So this simply means there was a very small increase in gym memberships. And here is marginal being used as an adverb. The number of gym members rose marginally each month. So this simply means the number of gym members went up very slightly each month. So marginal is a great word to use if there's a very small change. Let's get started with word number 1, which is mitigate. Now, mitigate is a verb, and it means to make something less harmful, serious, or severe. Here are some synonyms: reduce, lessen, alleviate, and ease. Collocations: mitigate the effects of. So this means to make the effects less harmful or less serious. Mitigate the impact of, mitigate risks. Many governments implement policies to mitigate the effects of climate change. So that means governments are using policies to try to make the effects of climate change less harmful or less serious. Strict safety regulations help mitigate the risks associated with construction work. Just make sure that when you use mitigate, you use it for bad things. We normally don't use mitigate for something positive. Let's look at word number 2 now, which is allocate. Allocate is a verb, and it means to give something officially to someone or for a particular purpose. So synonyms are give, assign, and share. Collocations: allocate resources, allocate time, allocate money. So for all of these collocations, it means we are giving those things. We are giving resources for a particular purpose. We are giving time for a particular purpose. And that's the key thing with allocate. It means you're giving something for a particular purpose, for a specific reason. The government decided to allocate more money to public education. So that means the government is giving more money for the reason of improving public education. Companies must allocate time for employee training. Same thing, they are choosing to give time for a specific purpose. Now, many students forget that allocate is usually followed by things like money, time, or resources, so make sure you use it like that in your essays. Let's move on to word number 3, which is detrimental. Detrimental is a great word. It's an adjective, and it means causing harm or damage. Synonyms are harmful, bad, or damaging. So here are some collocations. Detrimental effect. So this means a bad effect which has caused harm or caused something negative to happen. Detrimental impact. Detrimental to. Smoking has a detrimental effect on public health. So this means smoking has an effect on public health, and this effect is that it causes harm, it causes damage. Too much screen time can be detrimental to children's development. Detrimental is a great alternative to bad, but it's only for negative effects or results. Don't use it to describe people or feelings. So for example, you wouldn't say something like John is detrimental. All right, let's move on to number 4, which is implement. Implement is a verb, and it means to start using a plan, a rule, or an idea. Here are some synonyms: start, use, or carry out. Collocations: implement a policy. So this means to start using a policy, to put that policy into effect. Implement a strategy, same thing. Implement a solution, same thing, to start using a solution. The government plans to implement new environmental rules. So this means the government is planning to start using these new environmental rules. Example number 2, many schools have implemented strategies to improve student performance. So that means these schools have started using strategies to improve student performance. Now, make sure you only use implement with things like policies, rules, or strategies. You can't say things like implement work or implement a task. Let's move on to word 5, which is emphasize. Emphasize is a verb, and it means to give special importance or attention to something. Synonyms: highlight, stress, or point out. Collocations: emphasize the importance of, emphasize the need for, emphasize a point. So if you emphasize a point, you're giving special attention to that point or to that thing. Teachers often emphasize the importance of critical thinking. So this could mean something like teachers often tell their students how important critical thinking is. They give special importance to that thing. The report emphasizes the need for immediate action on climate change. So this means the report is giving special attention to the fact that climate change needs immediate action. So if you want to show the examiner that a point is really important in your argument, emphasize is a great word to use, but don't use it too often, otherwise it might lose its effect. Moving on to word 6, which is abundant. Abundant is an adjective, and it means existing in large amounts or more than enough. Synonyms: plentiful, a lot of, and a large amount of. Collocations: abundant resources. So this means a lot of resources, more than enough. Abundant opportunities, same thing. Abundant evidence, same thing. A lot of evidence, more than enough. So here's an example. Renewable energy provides abundant opportunities for job creation. There is abundant evidence that regular exercise improves mental health. So this is saying that there's more than enough evidence to show that regular exercise is or can improve your mental health. Now, just remember that we normally use abundant for positive or neutral things like opportunities, resources, evidence, or even money. So for example, you could say something like abundant opportunities, but you wouldn't say something like abundant traffic or abundant pollution, because these things are generally thought of as negative. Let's move on to 7 now, which is justify. Justify is a verb, and it means to give a good reason or explanation for something. Some synonyms are explain, give a reason for, or defend. Collocations, justify a decision. So this means you explain your reasons for your decision. Justify an action, same thing. Justify the cost. Here are some examples. Governments must justify any increase in public transportation fees. So this means that if governments increase the fee for public transport, they have to explain that. They have to give good reasons for that. It is difficult to justify spending large amounts of money on space exploration. So this means it's difficult to give some good reasons why we should spend all this money on space exploration. So justify is used when you give reasons for actions, decisions, or opinions. So you can say justify a decision or justify an action, but you wouldn't use it with things like colors or feelings. It wouldn't make sense to say justify a color. Moving on to number 8, which is compulsory. Compulsory is an adjective, and it means something that must be done because of a rule or law. So it must be done. Synonyms, required, necessary, and mandatory. Collocations, compulsory education. So this means education that you must do because of a certain rule or law. Compulsory attendance. Same thing, it means you must go to something. Compulsory military service. This is often used in countries where they make their young people do military service. It's compulsory. You can't choose, you have to do it. In many countries, education is compulsory until the age of 16. Some governments have introduced compulsory military service for young adults. So again, we're saying that this military service for young adults is something that must be done. And it must be done because there's a rule or a law to say so. Just be careful because some students mix up compulsory and necessary. Now, compulsory means something that is required by a rule or a law. You have no choice. But necessary just means it's needed, but it might not always be required. Let's move on to the next one, which is contribute. Contribute is a verb, and it means to give something, for example, time, money, or effort, to help achieve something. For example, a result. Synonyms, give, add to, help. Collocations, contribute to society. So this means you're helping to improve society. Contribute to the economy. Same thing. You're giving something and it's achieving a result for the economy. Contribute to a solution. Now let's look at some examples. Education can contribute to economic growth by creating a skilled workforce. By volunteering their time and skills, individuals can contribute to a variety of community improvement projects. So this means that if people volunteer, they are giving their time, and this is helping to improve or make a difference to these community improvement projects. Now, be careful because contribute normally needs to after it. For example, we would say contribute to society, not just contribute society. Moving on to number 10 now, which is sustainable. Sustainable is an adjective, and it means able to continue for a long time without causing harm. Synonyms, long-lasting, environmentally friendly, maintainable. Collocations, sustainable development, sustainable energy, sustainable practices. So when it comes to sustainable practices, this is talking about things that you can keep doing for a long time without causing harm, and it's normally referring to the environment. Many governments are investing in sustainable energy sources like wind and solar power. So if these energy sources are sustainable, you can keep using them for a long time and there's no damage. So think about wind. You can keep using wind for a long time and there's not going to be any damage to the our planet or to the environment. Promoting sustainable development is essential to protect the environment for future generations. So sustainable is a great word for when you want to talk about long-term solutions, especially for the environment or the economy. Moving on to number 11, which is influence. Influence can be a noun and it can also be a verb. Now, it means the power to affect how someone thinks or what happens. Here are some synonyms: affect, impact, or shape. Collocations: influence on behavior. So this means the power to affect how someone behaves. Influence public opinion. So this means the power to affect how the public thinks about a specific issue. And influence decision making. Examples: parents have a strong influence on their children's values and behavior. Well, this is very obvious because parents are the ones that teach their children, so they have the power to affect how their children think. Social media can influence public opinion during elections. When you're using influence, make sure to use influence with on when you're using influence as a noun. For example, influence on young people, but you don't need to use on when you're using influence as a verb. So for example, social media can influence behavior. So for that sentence, we don't need on because influence is a verb. Moving on to number 12, which is affordable. Affordable is an adjective and it means cheap enough for most people to buy or pay for. And synonyms are cheap, reasonably priced, and low cost. Collocations: affordable housing. So this means most people can afford that housing. Affordable healthcare, same thing. Most people can buy it. Most people have enough money. Affordable prices. Many governments are working to provide affordable housing for low-income families. Affordable healthcare is a major concern in many countries. So this is saying that having access to healthcare that most people have the money to pay for is a major concern in a lot of countries. So affordable is a great synonym for cheap, which can sound a little bit too informal in academic writing. Moving on to 13, which is generate. Generate is a verb, and it means to produce or to create something. Synonyms: produce, create, or cause. Collocations: generate income. So this means to produce income, to make money. Generate electricity, so to create electricity. Generate interest, same thing. Here's an example: renewable energy sources like wind and solar can generate electricity without harming the environment. Government investment in infrastructure projects can generate employment opportunities. So this means it can create employment, it can create jobs for people. Please note that generate often describes creating results or outcomes, not physical objects. So for example, we wouldn't say to generate a chair because a chair is a physical object. Moving on to 14, which is enhance. Enhance is a verb and it means to improve something or to make it better. Synonyms: improve, increase, or boost. Collocations: enhance performance, so improve performance, enhance quality, to make the quality better, and enhance skills. New teaching methods can enhance students' learning outcomes. Investing in renewable energy can enhance a country's long-term economic growth. So this just means that if governments invest in this type of energy, well, it can improve a country's economic growth. So enhance is a great word to use instead of, using very simple words like improve or make better. Moving on to 15, which is access. Access can be a noun, and it can also be a verb, meaning the ability to use or reach something. Synonyms: entry, opportunity to use or reach. Collocations, access to education. So this means that people can use the education in that place. Access to healthcare, same thing. So the ability to use that healthcare. Access to technology. Here are some examples. Many rural communities lack access to quality healthcare services. So this means that many rural communities do not have the ability to use quality healthcare services. Improving access to higher education can help reduce social inequality. So this means giving more people the ability to use higher education can help to reduce social inequality. Remember, when you're using access as a noun, we normally say access to something with to, like access to information, access to the internet. Moving on to 16, which is participate. Now, participate is a verb and it means to take part in an activity or an event. Some synonyms are take part, join, or engage. Collocations, participate in activities. So this simply means you do some activities, you take part in some activities. Participate in discussions, same thing. Participate in programs. Students are encouraged to participate in extracurricular activities to develop social skills. So this means it is suggested to students that they take part in these activities to help improve their social skills. Many citizens chose to participate or take part in the government's recycling program. Just something to remember, we normally say participate in something. So for example, participate in discussions. We wouldn't say participate discussions. You need to have that in. Moving on to 17, which is priority. Now, a priority is a noun, and it's something that is more important than other things and should be dealt with first or should be handled first. Synonyms, main focus, top concern, main importance. Collocations, top priority. So this means something is the most important thing. Set priorities. So this means to decide what is important. Give priority to. This means to make something more important than other things. So here are some examples. Improving public health care should be a top priority for governments. This means that improving healthcare should be the most important thing for governments. Many companies give priority to hiring candidates with strong communication skills. So this simply means that when companies are thinking about who to hire, one of the things that is the most important for them is strong communication skills. So priority is a great word you can use in your essays to show what should come first or what is most important when you're solving a problem or making a decision. Moving on to number 18, which is restrict. Restrict is a verb. It means to limit or to control something. Synonyms, limit, control, reduce. Collocations, restrict access, restrict movement, restrict freedom. So for all of these things, it's talking about controlling or limiting something. So restricting freedom, limiting freedom, controlling freedom. Let's look at some examples. Many governments restrict access to certain websites for security reasons. So this means that many governments control or limit the access to certain websites because they might be dangerous or cause problems. Some cities restrict the use of private cars in busy areas to reduce traffic congestion. This means that the number of private cars will be limited or controlled. Why? To reduce traffic congestion. So restrict is a very useful verb when you're writing about rules, laws, or actions that might limit things, particularly in problem solution essays. Let's move on to 19, which is maintain. Maintain is a verb, and it means to keep something at the same level or in good condition. Synonyms, keep, continue, preserve. Collocations: maintain standards. So this means to keep the standards at the same level or at a good level. Maintain health. So again, this means to keep health at the same level. Maintain relationships. So to keep our relationships in good condition. Governments must maintain high standards in public healthcare services. It can be challenging to maintain a healthy work-life balance in today's busy society. So this means it might not be easy to keep your work-life balance at the same level, because sometimes you might have to work too much. And then if you work too much, well, there's no work-life balance anymore. Now, some students confuse maintain with improve. Maintain means keeping something as it is at the same level, but improve means making something better. Moving on to 20, which is adequate. Adequate is an adjective, and it means enough or good enough for a particular purpose. Synonyms: enough, sufficient, or acceptable. Collocations: adequate resources, so enough resources. Adequate support, enough support. Adequate standard, good enough. So many people argue that government funding for public education is not adequate. So this is saying that governments are not providing enough money for public education. The funding is not enough. Workers must receive adequate training to perform their jobs safely. So this is saying that workers need to have enough training to perform their jobs safely. So adequate means something meets the basic requirements. You know, it's enough, but it's probably not fantastic. It's just enough. Now, it's a great word to use instead of just saying enough. Moving on to 21, which is minimize. Minimize is a verb, and it means to reduce something as much as possible. That's the key there. To reduce something as much as possible. Synonyms: reduce, lower, decrease. Collocations: minimize risks. So this means to make the risks as small as possible. Minimize costs, same thing. It means to make the costs as small as possible or as low as possible. Minimize damage. Here are some examples. Governments should take action to minimize the environmental damage caused by industrial activities. So because of these industrial activities, there may have been some environmental damage. So governments should take action. They should do something to make that damage as small as possible. Proper planning can help minimize the risks associated with large construction projects. So the word minimize works best when you're talking about things that people usually want to keep as low as possible, like costs or negative things like pollution. Moving on to 22, which is diverse. Diverse is an adjective, and it means showing a lot of variety or differences, a lot of different things or people or anything really. Synonyms: varied, different, mixed. Collocations: diverse population. So this means a population with a lot of different people from different backgrounds and different countries. Diverse opinions. Same thing, a lot of different opinions. Diverse backgrounds. Cities often have a diverse population with people from many cultural backgrounds. And the second example, a diverse range of opinions can lead to more balanced and creative solutions. So this means different opinions can lead to better outcomes or better solutions. If you often use words like different, try using diverse instead to make your writing sound more formal and more academic. Moving on to 23, which is promote. Promote is a verb, and it means to support or encourage something so that it develops or becomes successful. Synonyms: support, encourage, help. Collocations: promote education. So this means to encourage education. Promote health, same thing. Promote awareness. This means to encourage people to know about something, to teach people about something. Governments often promote healthy lifestyles through public awareness campaigns. So this means that governments often encourage people to lead healthy lifestyles. How? Well, through education or public awareness campaigns. Many organizations promote the importance of environmental conservation. So this means that many organizations support this idea of environmental conservation. Now, remember, promote is not just for advertising products. It can also be used to talk about ideas or behaviors. Moving on to 24, which is efficient. Efficient is an adjective, and it means working well without wasting time, money, or energy. Synonyms: effective, well organized, productive. Collocations: an efficient system. So this means the system works well without wasting anything. Efficient method, same thing. Energy efficient. So this means something works well without wasting energy. Moving on to the examples, public transport systems need to be efficient to reduce traffic and pollution. Using energy efficient appliances can help lower electricity bills and protect the environment. So this means using appliances like microwaves or fridges that work well without wasting energy or electricity. Just something to note, don't confuse efficient with fast. Something can be quick, but still waste a lot of energy or money. Efficient means it works well and avoids waste. Moving on to 25, which is expand. Expand is a verb, and it means to make something larger or increase its size. Synonyms: grow, increase, extend. Collocations: expand knowledge. So that means to make your knowledge bigger or wider or more. Expand a business. Same thing, to make a business larger or bigger. Expand opportunities. Governments should invest in programs that expand educational opportunities for young people. So this means governments should do things that increase the amount of educational opportunities for young people. Many companies are looking to expand their operations into international markets. So this means many companies are wanting to increase their size and go into international markets. So if you often use words like increase or grow, try using expand sometimes to avoid repeating the same verbs. Let's move on now to 26, which is regulate. Regulate is a verb, and it means to control something, usually by making rules or laws. Synonyms: control, manage, oversee. Collocations: regulate prices. So this means to control prices with rules or laws. Regulate industries. Same thing, to control industries with laws or rules. Regulate behavior. Let's look at some examples. Governments often regulate industries to protect consumers and the environment. Some countries have introduced laws to regulate the use of personal data online. So this means some countries are using laws to control the use of personal data online. So regulate is very useful when writing about government actions or laws that control industries or behavior or technology. Moving on to 27, which is aware. Aware is an adjective which means knowing about something or having knowledge of it. Synonyms: conscious of, informed about, or familiar with. Collocations: aware of risks. So that means you know about the risks. Aware of issues. Same thing, you know about the issues. Aware of consequences. Same thing. Citizens need to be aware of the environmental impact of their daily choices. So this means people need to know what effect their actions are having on the environment. Many people are not fully aware of the health risks linked to poor nutrition. So this means many people don't really know the health risks linked to not having a good diet. Now, when you're using aware, remember to use aware of when explaining what someone knows. For example, aware of the risks, not aware the risks. You need to have that of, aware of something. Moving on to 28, which is establish. Establish is a verb and it means to start or create something that is meant to last, that is meant to be around for a long time. Synonyms: set up, create, found. Collocations: establish rules, so to create rules that are going to be around for a long time. Establish an organization, same thing, maybe to create a company that's going to be around for a long time. Establish a relationship. Examples: the government has established or created new guidelines to improve workplace safety. Many charities have been established to support education in developing countries. So this means that these charities have been created and they're probably going to be around for a long time. Now, don't confuse establish with start. Establish is much more formal and is normally better for things that are meant to last for a long time. Moving on to 29, which is factor. Factor is a noun and it is something that influences or causes a result. Synonyms: reason, cause, element. Collocations: key factor. So this means something important that influences or causes a result. Major factor, same thing, so a big factor. Contributing factor. Cost is often a major factor when students choose which university to attend. So this means that the amount of money you have to pay to go to university is often something that will influence students when they're deciding which university to attend or go to. One key factor in reducing pollution is improving public transportation. If you often find yourself using words like reason or cause, try using factor instead to sound a little bit more academic. Moving on to 30 now, acknowledge. Acknowledge is a verb and it means to accept or to recognize something as true or important. Synonyms: accept, recognize, admit. Collocations: acknowledge the importance of. So this means you recognize, you can see the importance of something. Acknowledge a problem. Same thing, you can see that there is a problem. Acknowledge responsibility. This means you accept responsibility. Governments must acknowledge the importance of addressing climate change. So this means that governments must accept that climate change is a big problem and they need to do something about it. Many companies now acknowledge the need for better work-life balance. So this is saying that many companies now know or accept that better work-life balance is something very important. Now, just be careful with this one. Don't confuse acknowledge with agree. You can acknowledge something without fully agreeing with it. Moving on to 31, which is compensate. Compensate is a verb and it means to give something to make a situation better, normally money. Synonyms: make up for, balance out, repay. Collocations: compensate for the loss. So that means to give something, again, normally money, to make the loss better. Having a loss is obviously a bad thing, but if you receive some money, well, it might make that situation a bit better. Compensate workers, so to give something to workers. Compensate by. Governments often compensate farmers who suffer crop losses due to natural disasters. So this means governments often give something to farmers to help make that bad situation a bit better. And what is that bad situation? Well, it's because they have suffered crop losses or damage to their farm. Long working hours should be compensated with adequate pay and vacation time. So the word compensate is really useful when you're talking about fixing problems or paying someone for a loss. Most of the time, it's used when talking about work, money, or social issues. Moving on to the next one, which is 32, embrace. Embrace is a verb and it means to accept or support something willingly. Now, synonyms are accept, adopt, and welcome. Collocations embrace change. So this means that you are accepting change, you are welcoming that change. Embrace opportunities. Same thing, you're accepting these opportunities, you're supporting them. Embrace technology. Many companies have embraced remote working as a long-term solution. So this means that many companies have accepted remote working or working from home as a long-term solution. Young people are often quick to embrace new technologies and ideas. Embrace is a great word to use when you want to say that people accept or support something new or different. It's really useful for essays about change and sometimes even when you're talking about modern society. Moving on now to 33, which is facilitate. Facilitate is a verb and it means to make something easier or help it happen. Synonyms: help, support, make easier. Collocations: facilitate learning. So this means to make learning much easier or to help learning happen. Facilitate communication, facilitate development. Now let's look at some examples. Technology can facilitate communication between people in different countries. So this means that technology can help make communication happen if people are in different countries. Good teaching methods can facilitate student learning and understanding. Facilitate is a formal word, so it's a great choice for IELTS essays. It really shows the examiner that you can use high-level verbs instead of simple ones like help. Moving on to 34, which is undermine. Undermine is a verb and it means to weaken something or to make something less effective. Synonyms: weaken, harm, damage. Collocations: undermine confidence. So this means to weaken confidence or to reduce someone's confidence. Undermine authority, same thing. Undermine efforts. So this means to make someone's actions less effective. Examples: spreading false information can undermine public trust in the media. So that means if the media tells lies or spreads false information, that might weaken the trust that the public has in the media. Corruption can undermine efforts to improve public services. Same thing, so it can weaken efforts or weaken actions to help improve public services. So undermine is much more advanced than just saying weaken or reduce, so it can really help to improve your vocabulary score. Use it when you're talking about actions that make a situation worse or reduce effectiveness. Moving on to 35, which is deteriorate. Deteriorate is a verb and it means to become worse over time. Synonyms: decline, worsen, weaken. Collocations: deteriorate rapidly. So this means to become worse very quickly. Deteriorate over time. So this means to become worse as time goes along. And deteriorate in quality. So this means that the quality becomes worse. Examples: without proper maintenance, public infrastructure can deteriorate rapidly. So this means if we don't look after public infrastructure like roads, for example, well, they can become worse and damaged very, very quickly. If the economy continues to deteriorate or become worse, unemployment rates may rise. So deteriorate is a formal verb that's great for describing things that slowly get worse, like the economy, health, or the environment. Moving on to 36, proponent. Proponent is a noun and it means a person who supports or argues in favor of something. Synonyms: supporter, advocate, defender. Collocations: proponent of renewable energy. So this means someone who supports renewable energy. Strong proponent. This means someone who really, really, really supports something. Leading proponents. Examples. Many proponents of renewable energy argue that it is key to combating climate change. So this means that many people who support renewable energy argue that ... She is a strong proponent of free public education for all citizens. So this means she's a strong supporter of free public education. So instead of always saying, I support, or I am a supporter of, or I believe this, I believe that, you can use I am a proponent of to sound more formal and academic. It's a really professional word, and it works really well in IELTS essays when you're giving your opinion about something. Moving on to 37, which is critic. Critic is a noun, and it's the opposite of a proponent. Critic means a person who disagrees with or disapproves something or doesn't support something. Synonyms: opponent, disapprover, skeptic. Collocations: critic of the policy. So this means someone who disagrees with a policy. Strong critic, so someone who really strongly disagrees with something. Harsh critic, that has a similar meaning to strong critic. Many critics of the new law argue that it limits personal freedom. So this is saying that many people who disagree with the new law argue that ... She has long been a critic of the government's environmental policies. So instead of always saying people who disagree say that ... well, you can write something like critics argue that ... It's a more precise and professional way to say the same thing. Moving on to 38, disrupt. Disrupt is a verb which means to interrupt or stop the normal progress of something or the normal movement of something. Synonyms: interrupt, disturb, interfere with. Collocations: disrupt services. So this means to interrupt or to stop the normal working of the services. Disrupt the economy. So this means to stop the normal functioning or progress of the economy. Disrupt education. Natural disasters can disrupt essential public services such as electricity and water supply. The rise of online shopping has disrupted traditional retail businesses. So because now we have online shopping, well, this has changed or interrupted the normal progress of traditional shops because most people are choosing to shop online now instead of actually going to a shop. So disrupt is really useful when you want to describe how something stops or changes the normal way that things work. It's really good for essays about technology, education, or even the economy. Moving on to 39, diminish. Diminish is a verb, and it means to make something smaller or less important. Synonyms: reduce, decrease, lessen. Collocations: diminish importance, diminish value, diminish the impact. So all of these collocations are saying to make something smaller or less important. Some people worry that using too much technology may diminish face-to-face communication skills. So this means to lessen or reduce people's ability to have conversations face-to-face. Efforts to improve the economy can help diminish the effects of poverty. So this means that if you try to improve the economy, well, it could make the effects of poverty much smaller. If you find yourself using reduce too often, diminish can help and add a bit of variety to your writing. It works really well when you're talking about effects or how important something is. Moving on to 40, incentivize. Incentivize is a verb, and it means to encourage someone to do something by offering rewards or benefits, most of the time money. Synonyms: motivate, encourage, promote. Collocations: incentivize behavior. So this means to encourage someone to act in a certain way by offering something in return. Incentivize businesses. Same thing. So this means to encourage businesses to do something. How? Well, by offering rewards or benefits. And finally, incentivize investment. Governments can incentivize companies to reduce carbon emissions by offering tax breaks. So this is saying that governments can encourage companies to reduce their carbon emissions. How? Well, by offering tax breaks. So that means that the companies will have to pay less tax. Many schools use reward systems to incentivize good behavior among students. So next time you want to say encourage, ask yourself, are they offering a reward? If they are, well, you might be able to use incentivize, and this is going to make your writing sound more advanced, professional, and accurate. Moving on to 41, compelling. Compelling is an adjective, and it means very convincing or hard to resist. Synonyms: convincing, persuasive, powerful. Collocations: compelling argument. So this means an argument that is very convincing or a very good argument. Compelling reason. Same thing, a very powerful reason. Compelling evidence. Examples: there are many compelling reasons to invest in renewable energy. So this means there are many good, strong, powerful, convincing, persuasive reasons to invest in renewable energy. The author presented a compelling argument in favor of free education. So the next time you want to describe an argument or a reason that's really strong and really persuasive, compelling is the perfect word to use. Moving on to 42, reinforce. This is a verb and it means to make something stronger. Synonyms: strengthen, support, back up. Reinforce an idea is the first collocation. This can mean to make the idea much stronger. Reinforce a message. Same thing, to make the message much stronger. Reinforce beliefs. The new policy reinforces the importance of equal opportunities in the workplace. So this means that the new policy is making the idea or the importance of equal opportunities much stronger. And the next example, teachers often use real-world examples to reinforce learning in the classroom. So that means teachers use real or things from the real world to help strengthen the students' understanding of something. Now, just something to note, the word reinforce can be used for both physical things and ideas. But for most of the time in writing task 2, you'll normally use it to talk about ideas, arguments, or beliefs, and not objects. Moving on to 43, viable. Viable is an adjective, and it means able to work successfully or be done. So it simply means something that might work, something that can work. Synonyms: workable, practical, realistic. Collocations: viable solution. So this means a solution that is able to work. It can work. Viable option, viable alternative. Investing in renewable energy is considered a viable solution to reduce carbon emissions. So this is a great word to use when you're talking about solutions in your writing task 2 essay. A viable solution means a solution that is able to work. It can work. Online learning has become a viable alternative to traditional classroom education. So instead of always saying good or possible, try using the word viable. But just remember, viable just means something that can work. It doesn't mean it's the best possible option or that it will work. Moving on to 44, which is hinder. Hinder is a verb and it means to make it difficult for something to happen or progress or to move forward. Synonyms: block, prevent, slow down. Collocations: hinder progress, hinder development, hinder success. So for all of these things, it simply means that it makes it difficult for these things to happen. It makes it difficult for progress to happen, makes it difficult for success to happen. Lack of investment in public transport can hinder the ability of low-income families to access better job opportunities. So that means if there's not enough money going into public transport, Well, this is going to make it difficult for low-income families to get access to those better job opportunities. Strict regulations may hinder or may block or prevent small businesses from expanding into new markets. So the word hinder is really useful when you want to explain how something makes progress slower or more difficult. Now, it doesn't mean to stop something completely. It just means to create challenges when trying to move forward. Moving on to the next one, which is compromise, word 45. Compromise is a verb, and it means to lower the quality of standards of something by making a deal or accepting less. Here are some synonyms: weaken, reduce, and damage. Damage can be a synonym for some contexts. Collocations: compromise quality. So if you compromise quality, that means you might lower the quality of something. Compromise safety, same thing, to lower the quality of safety. Compromise standards. Examples: cutting costs should not compromise the quality of healthcare services. So that means, okay, yes, we might have to reduce costs, but that doesn't mean we should also, or that should result in a lower quality of healthcare. Some argue that fast economic growth can compromise environmental sustainability. So again, we're using the word compromise to say this might lower the quality of environmental sustainability. Now, many students think that compromise only means finding a middle ground, but in IELTS essays, especially for writing task 2, it's often used for or to describe lowering standards or creating weaknesses to get a result. Let's move on to 46 now, which is accelerate. Accelerate is a verb, and it means to make something happen faster. Synonyms include speed up, hasten, and quicken. Collocations: accelerate growth. So this means to make growth happen faster. Accelerate progress. Same thing, to make progress happen faster. And the last one here, accelerate change. Same thing, okay, you're making change happen faster. Technological innovations have accelerated the pace of economic growth. So that means because new inventions in regards to technology are happening, well, this is increasing the speed of economic growth. Policies that support renewable energy can accelerate the transition or the change to cleaner power sources. So this is saying that these policies might be able to make the change happen much faster. A lot of students only think of cars or vehicles when they think of the word accelerate, but in IELTS essays, you can use it to talk about making something happen faster. Moving on to 47, retain. Retain is a verb, and it means to keep or continue to have something. Synonyms: keep, maintain, preserve. Collocations: retain information, so to keep information. Retain employees, continue to have employees. Retain control. Companies must work hard to retain or keep skilled employees in a competitive job market. Students who take regular breaks are more likely to retain information effectively. So that means if they have regular breaks, it's more likely they'll be able to continue to have that information or keep that information. So retain is a very useful verb when you want to talk about keeping something over time, whether it's skills, employees, or even something like control. Moving on to 48, fluctuate. Fluctuate is a verb, and it means to change frequently, especially by going up and down. Synonyms: vary, change, shift. Collocations: fluctuate prices. So this means prices are going up and down, they're changing frequently. Fluctuate levels, same thing. Fluctuate demand, same thing. So it means the demand is going up and down, it's changing frequently. Prices for basic goods often fluctuate or often change frequently due to changes in supply and demand. Energy consumption tends to fluctuate throughout the year depending on the weather. So that means the electricity or the power that people use changes frequently. And of course, that will mean that it goes up and down. So fluctuate is a great word to use when you want to describe something that keeps changing, especially when it goes up and down. You'll often need to use this one if you're talking about prices or trends. Moving on to 49, optimize. Optimize is a verb and it means to make something as effective or successful as possible. Synonyms: improve, maximize, enhance. Collocations: optimize performance. So this means to make the performance as good as possible. Optimize resources, optimize efficiency. Companies must optimize their use of resources to stay competitive. So this means if companies have money or time, they must use those things as effectively as possible to stay competitive and to stay in business. Students should optimize their study time or use their study time as effectively as possible to prepare for exams. Now, some students confuse optimize with improve, but optimize means making the best use of something, making it the best that you can. But improve, on the other hand, means making something better. But maybe you don't make it the best that it can possibly be. Moving on to word number 50, curtail. Curtail is a verb and it means to reduce or limit something. Synonyms: limit, reduce, restrict. Collocations: curtail spending, curtail freedom, curtail activities. So in all of these collocations, it's talking about reducing something, reducing spending, reducing freedom, limiting freedom. Governments may need to curtail public spending during economic downturns. So this means governments might need to reduce public spending during economic downturns. Some believe that strict regulations can curtail personal freedom or can reduce personal freedom. So curtail is a great way to say something has been reduced or limited without repeating or using words like cut or reduce. Let's start with the most common words students use, which are just too informal. The first one is you and your. This is one of the most common ones I see in writing task 2 essays, and you shouldn't be using it for two main reasons. The first one is it's just too informal. It sounds very casual. Now, please note that it's okay to use you and your for writing task 1 general training if you're writing to a friend, because that's a very casual and informal situation. However, for writing task 2, which is an essay, you should not be using you and your. Now, apart from that, you should also remember that you're not talking to the reader. You're talking in general, so you shouldn't be saying you and your. So what should you use instead? Well, you should use the most precise word for whatever you're talking about. So that means you need to use the best word in that situation to describe what you're talking about. So have a look at this sentence. If you don't rely on a car for public transport, it will reduce the number of vehicles on the road. Well, think about, who are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about commuters, and commuters are people who travel to a place and then back, normally to work or study. So we could say, if commuters don't rely on a car for transport, ... Here's another example. You can see that the vast majority of young people are addicted to social media platforms. Well, again, you're not specifically talking to the reader, so instead you could say something like, it can be seen that the vast majority of ... So this is a passive voice sentence, so this is going to help to boost your grammar score as well. All right, so the next one is so. So is mainly used in speaking and shouldn't be used in academic writing. So what can you use instead? Well, it depends on what you're trying to say, but you could say because of this, ... Or alternatively, you could say which means that, ... So here's an example. Many children are growing up in digital environments, so their attention spans are significantly shorter. Well, instead of saying that, you could say because of this. Many children are growing up, because of this, their attention spans are shorter. Here's another one. The population is aging, so healthcare systems will face more pressure. Well, again, we could use something else. The population is aging, which means that, and then you give more information. Number 3 is a lot of. This is a very informal phrase, so it shouldn't be used in writing. Instead, you can say many, a large number of, or a significant amount of. For example, a lot of money is spent on space research every year. Or instead, you could say a significant amount of money is spent. That is much more professional than just saying a lot of. Number 4 is a couple of or a few, and these are the opposite of many. And these are also too informal for IELTS writing. So instead, you can use phrases or words like several or a limited number of. There are only a few jobs available in rural areas, which often leads to urban migration. Well, no, that's too informal. We could say there are only a limited number of jobs available in rural areas. This is more professional and more academic and formal. Number 5 is I think. Now, there's nothing really wrong with this one, but you can make it much better by using a passive voice or using higher level vocabulary. So you could say something like, it can be argued that, or you could say, I am of the opinion that, and then you say what you think, you give your opinion. So here's an example. I think that employers should prioritize educational qualifications when hiring. Well, let's make that better and more professional. I am of the opinion that employers should prioritize educational ... The next word is things or stuff when you're talking about something in general. Again, this is very informal. So instead of saying things or stuff, you need to use the specific noun in that situation or the best word to describe that thing in that situation. So let's have a look at 2 examples. One of the most important things in education is good teaching. No. One of the most important aspects of education is good teaching. Let's look at one more. Young people spend excessive amounts of money on stuff they don't need. No, too informal. Young people spend excessive amounts of money on material possessions. This is the more precise piece of vocabulary here. The next one is an idiom, in a nutshell. A lot of students use this one to start their conclusion paragraph. So in a nutshell means in a short and simple way. But it's very informal, so instead of saying in a nutshell, you can simply say in conclusion. That's it. Just say in conclusion, then you need a comma, and then you can start writing your conclusion. So here's an example. In a nutshell, traffic congestion is a major issue in many capital cities all over the world. Well, no, that's too informal. In conclusion, traffic congestion is a major issue. All right, let's move on to the next type of vocabulary that you should not be using, which is shortened forms. So you might be thinking, what is a shortened form? Well, what I mean by that is, have a look at this word here, phone. Well, this is the shortened form of telephone. For IELTS writing, you need to write the full word. Let's have a look at some more examples. The next one is fridge. Well, that's the shortened form of refrigerator. The next one is ad. That's short for advertisement. The next one is gym. That's short for gymnasium. Flu, that's short for influenza, when you get really sick. Exam, that's short for examination. The next one is uni, that's short for university. The next one is math, that's short for mathematics. The next one is lab, that's short for laboratory. Finally, the last one is spec, that is short for specification. Now, please note that you can say the shortened forms in IELTS speaking, but for IELTS writing, you should be writing the full words. The next type of vocabulary you should avoid is idioms. But What are idioms? Well, they are phrases that have a meaning different from the individual words in them. They are used in everyday English to make speech more natural and interesting. Now, I'm going to show you 5 common idioms that students like to use in writing and what you can use instead. The first one is a double-edged sword. This one means something that has both positive and negative effects. So here's an example. Technology is a double-edged sword. Although it improves communication, it also reduces face-to-face interactions. So this is not correct for formal writing. Instead, you could say something like, technology has both positive and negative effects, although it... All right, the next one is a step in the right direction. This idiom means a small but positive action that moves you or something towards a goal. So here's an example. Investing in renewable energy is a step in the right direction for combating or fighting climate change. Well, no, that's too informal. Investing in renewable energy is a positive move towards combating climate change. This is more professional. All right, number 3, the third idiom is the tip of the iceberg. This means a small, visible part of a much bigger problem. So we're talking about a small part of a much bigger issue. Here is an example. Rising obesity rates are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to public health issues. So this is saying that rising obesity rates, yes, they're a problem, but they're just a small problem. There are other bigger issues. So instead of that, you could say rising obesity rates are only one small part of much larger public health issues. The next one is every coin has 2 sides. This one simply means every situation has both advantages and disadvantages. So, every situation has both good things and bad things. Here's an example. Some argue that online learning is convenient, but every coin has 2 sides and it may reduce student engagement. Okay, fair enough. We're saying that there are good things and bad things, but that's too informal. Some argue that online learning is convenient, but it also has disadvantages. So you can see here that it's very simple to put this into more formal English. We simply say a good thing, and then we say, but it also has. And then we talk about a negative or negatives in the plural. Okay, the 5th and final idiom is at the end of the day. This means when everything is considered, when you think about everything. Here is an example. At the end of the day, government policies should prioritize long-term sustainability. Note that's too informal. Instead of that, we can use a very professional word, ultimately. This has the same meaning when all things are considered or thought about. Government policies should... So try not to use idioms in formal writing. They are more suitable for speaking. The next type of words that you should avoid are slang words. But what does slang mean? What is a slang word? Well, slang refers to very informal words or expressions that are often used in very casual speech. These words are not usually appropriate for formal writing, especially in IELTS essays. So now I'm going to show you 5 slang words I've seen students use in writing task 2 essays. The first one is guys. This is a very informal word which just means a group of people. So instead of saying guys, you can say people, individuals, or the public, depending on what you're trying to say. So here's an example. Many guys believe that education should be free for everyone. No, too informal. Simply say many people believe that. The next one is messed up, and this means to do something badly or to make a serious mistake. So instead of saying messed up, you should say something like made a mistake, handled poorly, or mismanaged. Governments have really messed up the response to the crisis. No good. Too informal. Governments have handled the response to the crisis very poorly. Yes, much better, more professional. The next one is big deal, which means something very important or significant. So instead of saying big deal, you can say something like major issue, serious concern, or important matter. Pollution is a big deal in many cities around the world. No, no good. Pollution is a serious concern in many urban areas across the globe. Yes, much better, more professional. The next one is totally, which just means completely or fully. So instead of saying totally, you can say completely, entirely, or strongly. For example, I totally agree that students should be encouraged to study abroad. Well, this is great. You're trying to give your opinion. However, it's too informal, the word totally. Instead, you can use the word strongly. I strongly agree that students should be encouraged. All right, the last one for slang words is cool, which is a very informal way to say something is good or impressive. So instead of saying cool, you could say useful, beneficial, or effective, depending on the context. For example, I think it's really cool that companies are offering flexible working hours now. Well, no, cool is too informal. Companies offering flexible working hours is extremely beneficial to employees. This is much more professional. And note here with this one, how you don't always have to replace the word with another word in exactly the same place. You'll see that with the second sentence here, we have changed the sentence. We have put that adjective, beneficial, at the end of the sentence instead of at the start. The next type of words you should not use are basic words. Why? Well, to get a high band score in IELTS vocabulary, you need to use some less common vocabulary. So the first basic word I see students using all the time is good. Instead of using good, there are so many alternatives you can use, including beneficial, effective, and advantageous. So here's an example. Online learning is good for students who live in remote areas. No, no good. This is too basic if you want a higher band score. Online learning is beneficial for students who live in remote areas. This is much better, much more professional. The next one I hear all the time is the opposite of good, bad. So instead of saying bad, you can try using words like harmful, ineffective, or problematic. Here is an example. Air pollution is bad for people's health. Well, no, this is too basic, this word bad. So instead, we can use a more precise word or a better word choice in this situation and say air pollution is harmful to people's health. The problem with words like good and bad is that they're too general. But if you use something like the word harmful, that's more specific and it's a better fit, or it just describes the situation much better in this sentence. The next one is give. So instead of saying give, you can say something like provide, offer, or deliver. Here is an example. The government should give financial support to the unemployed. No, too basic. Let's use the more precise word in this situation. The government should provide financial support to the unemployed. Next up, we have get. Well, instead of saying get, you can say receive, obtain, or gain. Here's an example. Students can get valuable life experience from studying abroad. Well, that's okay, but the word get is too basic. Let's change it to a more professional word. Students can gain valuable life experience from studying abroad. Moving on to number 5, which is do. This is a very common one that a lot of students use in more general situations. Or instead, you could say carry out, conduct, or perform, depending on the sentence, of course. Here's an example. Researchers should do more studies on climate change. Well, that's too basic. Let's use a better word. Researchers should conduct more studies on climate change. This is a more professional word in this context. Another type of word you should avoid is contractions. Now, what are contractions? Well, contractions are shorter ways to say two or more than two words together, like saying don't instead of do not. So here's another example, saying can't instead of cannot. So let me show you 10 more examples of contractions that you should not use in IELTS writing, because contractions are a bit informal and they're more suitable for spoken language rather than written. The next one is won't instead of will not. Next, we've got it's instead of it is or it has, depending on what you're saying. The next one is isn't instead of is not. Next, we've got doesn't instead of does not. I'm instead of I am, there instead of they are, I'd instead of I would, mustn't instead of must not, and finally could've instead of could have. Let's look at word number 1, which is spontaneous. Spontaneous is an adjective and it means something done without planning or thinking too much in advance. So some synonyms for spontaneous are unplanned, sudden, or random. Here are some collocations. Spontaneous decision. So that means you make a decision without too much thought or without too much planning or thinking. Spontaneous reaction. So that means you react, you respond, you reply to something without much thinking. You do it quite quickly. And finally, spontaneous trip. So maybe you have the thought to go on a vacation today and then you go on the vacation tomorrow. That would be a spontaneous trip. Now let's look at some examples. We decided to take a spontaneous trip to the beach. I'm an extremely spontaneous person, which is in contrast to my mum, who likes to think everything through very carefully. So spontaneous is a great word to use when you want to describe something that happens without much planning or without much thinking. Let's look at the second word now, which is optimistic. Optimistic is an adjective and it means hoping or believing that good things will happen in the future. Another way to think about optimistic is it means positive thinking, always looking on the bright side, always thinking about the good things. Here are some synonyms: hopeful and positive. And some collocations for optimistic are optimistic attitude. So if someone has an optimistic attitude, it means that they have positive thinking. They normally think that good things will happen. Another collocation is optimistic view. So this is very similar to optimistic attitude. And the last one is to feel optimistic. So if you feel optimistic, that means you think that good things are probably going to happen. So here are some examples. Despite all of the challenges I faced, I remained optimistic. So this means, yes, I had lots of problems and maybe lots of negative things, but even though I had all of those things, I still tried to have positive thinking or be hopeful about the future. And the second one is, she's an optimistic person and always tries to look for the positives in every situation. And this is a great way to use the word optimistic. You can use it to describe what type of person someone is. So like we've got here, we've said she's an optimistic person. Alternatively, you could say she is optimistic. Now, the opposite of optimistic is pessimistic. So pessimistic means that you think bad things will happen. You have a negative attitude towards the future or towards things in general. So instead of just saying someone thinks positively, try using the word optimistic instead. Now let's move on to word number 3, which is challenging. Challenging is also an adjective and it means difficult in a way that tests your ability. So this is a great one to use instead of just saying hard or difficult. So here are some synonyms: hard, difficult, or tough. Here are some collocations: challenging task, so a task that is difficult. challenging situation, a situation that's difficult or hard, or a challenging experience. Now let's look at some examples. Learning a new language has been quite challenging for me, but I think I've done well. So you'll see here, instead of just saying quite hard, we've replaced hard with challenging, and we are using more advanced vocabulary. And let's look at one more example. Adjusting to a new culture can be incredibly challenging. So again, we're saying that adjusting to a new culture is quite difficult. So instead of always saying something is hard, try using the word challenging. And if something is really difficult or really hard, you can say incredibly challenging. Moving on to word number 4, which is notion. Notion is a noun, and it means an idea, a belief, or an understanding of something. So notion is something that you can't touch. Here are some synonyms: idea, belief, or thought. Here are some collocations: vague notion. If something is a vague notion, it's not very clear. Common notion. If something is a common notion, it's an idea that most people probably know or most people are probably aware of. To challenge a notion. If you challenge a notion or you challenge an idea, you question whether that is 100% true or accurate. So here are some examples. Many people have the notion or have the idea that success requires hard work. So this simply means many people think, or they have an idea, that to be successful, you need to engage in a lot of hard work. And finally, I think the idea that money brings happiness is false, because money can't buy certain things like health. So notion is a great word to use when you want to talk about an idea or a belief. Let's have a look at the 5th word now, which is encounter. Encounter is a verb, and it means to experience or to meet something, especially something unexpected or something that is unplanned. Here are some synonyms: meet, face, or experience. Here are some collocations: encounter a problem. So that means you experience a problem. Encounter difficulties. So again, that means you encounter difficulties, you encounter difficult things, you face difficult things. And finally, you can just say encounter something. So encounter plus a noun. Now, here are some examples. At my new position, I encountered a lot of difficulties. So instead of just saying at my new job, I had lots of problems, you can say something like this: I encountered a lot of difficulties. This is going to make your speaking much more professional. And here's another example. If children encounter lots of challenges when they are young, it will help to build resilience. So this is saying if children face a lot of problems when they're young, it will help to build their resilience. So encounter is a great word to use when you meet something or you experience something, normally when it's unplanned. Okay, let's have a look at the next word, word number 6, which is deal with. Now, deal with is a phrasal verb, and it means to handle a situation or a problem. And it's often something that is negative or not good. So a situation that's not good or a problem that's not good. Here are some synonyms: manage, handle, or address. Here are some collocations: deal with problems. So that means handle problems, maybe to try and fix problems. Deal with stress. So again, you need to handle stress. You need to try and fix your stress or maybe even reduce your stress. Deal with customers. So again, handle customers. Now let's look at some examples. At my work, I often have to deal with angry and aggressive customers. A lot of people today find it hard to deal with stress, so they need to come up with some strategies that work for them. So this is saying that a lot of people find it hard to handle stress or to manage stress when it comes into their lives. So they need to think of some strategies that can help them in that situation. So deal with is a very common phrasal verb that you can use to describe handling situations or problems or managing situations or problems. And you should always try to use phrasal verbs in the speaking test where natural. We are up to word number 7 now, which is criticism. Criticism means saying what you think is wrong about something. And that's the thing. Normally with criticism, you'll say what you think is wrong about something. Here are some synonyms: disapproval, judgment, or complaint. Here are some collocations: receive criticism. So if someone tells you what they don't like about you or something that you did, that means you are receiving criticism. The next one is constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is criticism that tries to help you to improve. It tries to help you to develop yourself or to do something better next time. And finally, the last one is harsh criticism. So that means very strong criticism. So here are some examples. My only criticism with that policy is that it doesn't take into account all of the relevant factors. So this person is saying that the policy is okay, maybe it's good, but the only thing that's wrong with it is it doesn't take into account all factors. He always welcomes constructive criticism. So this means he always welcomes opinions about him or his work that can help him improve. So criticism is a great word to use when you want to say what you don't like about someone, someone's work, actions, or ideas. Okay, moving on to the 8th word now, which is resolve. Resolve means to find a solution to a problem, to fix a problem. So some synonyms are solve and fix. Here are some collocations: resolve a problem. So that simply means to fix a problem. Resolve an issue. Well, that has a similar meaning to resolve a problem. And the last one is resolve a conflict. A conflict is when 2 or more than 2 people are having a disagreement or having a fight. So if you resolve a conflict, that means you fix that conflict, you fix that issue. Here are some examples. My colleagues and I often work together to resolve issues. So this means we work together to fix problems. We work together to solve problems. Learning how to resolve personal conflicts is a very important skill that most people don't have. So this means learning how to fix personal problems is very important. So instead of always saying to fix a problem, try saying to resolve a problem instead. It's going to make your speaking sound more professional. Moving on to the 9th word now, which is impact. Impact is a noun, but it can sometimes be used as a verb. But for now, we're going to talk about the noun. So impact means the effect that something has on someone or something. So that's the key word there. Effect. Here are some synonyms: effect, result, and influence. Here are some collocations: positive impact. So this means a positive result or a positive effect. Negative impact, well, that's the opposite. That means a bad effect or a bad result. And finally, major impact. So that means a very big effect, a very big result. So here are some examples. Pollution clearly has a negative impact on the environment. So we're simply saying that pollution has a negative effect, a bad effect on the environment. Education has a major impact on a person's future, which is why it is so valued in places like Asia. So this means education has a very big effect on a person's future. So impact is a great word to use to describe how one thing affects another, and it sounds more professional than just using the word affect. Moving on to the 10th word now, which is encourage. Encourage is a verb and it means to make someone feel confident or to help them want to do something. Here are some synonyms: support, motivate, or inspire. Here are some collocations: encourage someone to try something. So if you encourage someone to try something, that means you support them and you help them want to do something. So maybe you suggest to them that if they do that thing, they will get positive results back. Encourage learning. So this means when you suggest to someone that they should learn. And finally, encourage teamwork. One thing teachers can do is encourage their students to ask questions if they aren't sure about anything. So that means that teachers should tell their students, hey guys, if you have any questions, please ask. Don't be shy. And finally, my parents always encouraged me to do my best. The first thing we need to talk about is what is a phrasal verb. Well, a phrasal verb is a verb combined with a word like a preposition or an adverb. For example, out, up, or in. The meaning is often different from the individual words. For example, give up means to stop trying. It's not talking about giving or up. All right, so now let's talk about how phrasal verbs actually work. Like I mentioned before, a phrasal verb has a verb and a preposition or an adverb. So here is an example: sit down. The sit is the verb and the down is the adverb, but together these things make a phrasal verb. Now, the next thing you need to be aware of is that some phrasal verbs are separable. So that means the two parts of the phrasal verb don't have to be next to each other. So let me show you what I mean. If we say turn off the light, that is correct. We've got the turn and we've got the off together. They are right next to each other. However, if we say turn the light off, that is also fine. That is also correct. So you can see that the turn and the off, they are not next to each other now. On the other hand, some phrasal verbs are not separable. So for example, look at this example here. Look after the baby. You can see that we've got the look and the after next to each other. This is correct. However, if we say look the baby after, this is not correct. We cannot separate the two parts of the phrasal verb. Now, another thing you need to be aware of is that some phrasal verbs need an object, and these types of phrasal verbs are called transitive phrasal verbs, and some don't need an object. These are called intransitive phrasal verbs. So let me show you some examples. Give up. This phrasal verb here needs an object. For example, I gave up chocolate. You need to say what you're talking about. On the other hand, wake up does not need an object. So you can say, I wake up at 7 a.m. You can see there that there's no object. So now you know the basics of phrasal verbs. So let's look at 10 of them that you can use to increase your speaking band score. Let's start with phrasal verb number 1, which is come across. Come across means to find something by chance. So you didn't intend to find it, you just happened to find it. Is it separable? No, it is not a separable phrasal verb. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Now here are some collocations: come across something and come across a person. So if you come across a person, you just find or meet that person by chance. It was not planned. So here are some examples. I was cleaning out my closet last weekend and I came across a box of photos from when I was a child. So this simply means that you just happened to find those photos. It wasn't planned. And here is one more example. People often come across useful information online when they're not even looking for it. So, come across is a great phrasal verb to use when you find something unexpectedly. You don't plan it, it just happens. Now, let's look at phrasal verb number 2, which is figure out. Figure out means to find an answer or solution after thinking about it. So, is it separable? Yes, it is. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Here are some synonyms: solve, work out, and understand. And here are some collocations: figure out a problem. So if you figure out a problem, you find an answer or a solution to that problem. Figure out a way and figure something out. These are two more collocations. So let's have a look at some examples. I had to figure out how to manage my time better during exam times. So I had to find an answer in regards to how to manage my time better. And you see here that the figure and the out, they are next to each other. However, in this example, they are not next to each other because remember, figure out is separable. So it can take years for people to figure their goals out, especially when they're under pressure to succeed quickly. So just one more time, you can see that we've got figure, then we've got their goals, and then we've got out, which is the last part of the phrasal verb. So figure out is a super useful phrasal verb when you're talking about solving a problem or understanding something after thinking it through. Now let's move on to phrasal verb number 3, which is run out of. Run out of means to have no more of something, so there's nothing left. Is it separable? No. And does it need an object? Yes, it does. Here are some synonyms: use up and finish. Here are some collocations: run out of time. So if you run out of time, well, you have no more time left. Run out of money, well, no more money left. Run out of ideas, run out of fuel. So here's the first example. I ran out of money during my holiday, so I had to be really careful with spending. You can see here that this phrasal verb is not separable. So we've got the ran, the out, and the of together. They are next to each other. Here's the second one. If a company runs out of new ideas, it can quickly fall behind its competitors. So this simply means if a company doesn't have any more ideas, well, that can be a problem. Run out is perfect for talking about situations where you've used something completely, whether it's time, money, or something else like patience. So let's move on and have a look at phrasal verb number 4, which is catch up with. The with is optional. It depends on how you're using this phrasal verb. So this one means to talk with someone after not seeing them for a while. Is it separable? No. Does it need an object? Yes, if you're using it with someone. Now, a synonym here is chat. And here are some collocations: catch up with a friend. So that just means to meet a friend and talk with a friend. Catch up over coffee. So you talk to someone while you're having a coffee together. Catch up on life. So that just means to talk about what has been happening in life. So here is the first example. I usually catch up with my best friend every few weeks. We go for coffee and talk about everything. So you can see here that we've got catch up with all together. And we've used with because we're talking about a specific person. Catch up with my best friend. Here is another one. Catching up with people you care about is important for maintaining strong relationships. So you can see again that we've got catch up with all together because this one is not separable. So catch up with is a great way to talk about connecting with friends or family after you haven't seen them in a while. Let's move on to phrasal verb number 5 now, which is take up. Take up means to start doing a new activity, hobby, or interest. Is it separable? Yes, it is. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Here are some synonyms: start and begin. Collocations, take up painting. So this simply means you start doing painting. Take up yoga. Again, you start doing yoga. Take up a new hobby is also another one. Now, let's look at some examples. I took up yoga last year to help me relax and stay active. So you can see here we have got took and up together. However, in this second example, we have separated the phrasal verb. Many people decide to take a new hobby up when they retire to stay mentally and physically engaged. So we've got take, and then we've got a new hobby, and then we've got up, which is the last part of the phrasal verb. Take up is perfect for talking about starting a new hobby or interest, especially when you want to show that you're learning something new. So let's move on now to phrasal verb number 6, which is turn down. So turn down means to say no to something that you're offered. Now, please note there is another meaning of turn down, and it can mean to reduce the volume of something, but we're not talking about that meaning here. Is it separable? Yes, it is. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Here are some synonyms: reject, refuse, or not accept. Here are some collocations: turn down an offer. So if someone offers you something and you turn it down, that means you say no. Turn down a job. Same thing. You say no to the job. Turn down an invitation. Again, same thing, you say no. Now let's look at some examples. Here's the first one. I turned down a job offer last year because it didn't suit my goals. So that simply means I said no to the job which was offered to me. Here's another one. And you can see here that we have separated the turn and the down. Some people turn opportunities down because they're afraid of change or uncertainty. So you can see here we've got the turn, then we've got opportunities, and then we've got down, which is the last part of the phrasal verb. So turn down is a really useful phrasal verb when you want to talk about when you say no to something like a job or an invitation. Let's move on now to phrasal verb 7, which is look forward to. Look forward to means to feel happy or excited about something that will happen, something that will happen in the future. Is it separable? No, this one is not. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. It is transitive. Now here are some synonyms: be excited about and can't wait for. Here are some collocations: look forward to something. So that means you feel happy or excited about something that will happen in the future. And look forward to seeing you. So you can use this one when you're talking about meeting someone in the future. Now, here are some examples. I'm really looking forward to my trip next month. It's been a long time since I traveled. People often look forward to holidays because it's a chance to relax and spend time with family. So this simply means that people feel excited about holidays that will happen in the future. Look forward to is a great way to show excitement about the future. And remember, it's normally followed by a noun or a verb with an ing. All right, let's move on to phrasal verb number 8, which is put off. Put off simply means to do something later instead of now. And we normally use put off to talk about something that we should do now, but we decide to do it later. Is it separable? Yes, it is. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Here are some synonyms: delay and wait to do. Collocations: put off homework. So that means you don't do the homework now, you do it later. Next one, put off a meeting. So again, you don't have the meeting now, you do it later. And the last one, put off a decision. So here's an example. I often put off studying until the last minute, which makes things stressful. So you can see with this one that put and off are together. This is different to this second example where the put and off have been separated. There's something in the middle. Some people put important tasks off because they don't feel motivated or focused. So you can see here that we've got put, then we're saying what we put off, and that's important tasks. And then we have off, which is the second part of the phrasal verb. Put off is a very common and useful phrasal verb to talk about things that you wait to do later, and it's normally because you don't want to do them. Let's move on to the next one, which is phrasal verb 9. This one is work out. And work out, it has several meanings, but we're going to focus on this meaning here, which means to solve a problem or to understand something. Is it separable? Yes, it is. Does it need an object? Yes, it does. Some synonyms are solve and fix. Here are some collocations. Work out a problem. So that simply means you solve a problem, you find the answer. Work out the answer and work things out. Now let's have a look at some examples. We had a small issue during our group project, but we worked it out quickly. So note here, we've got something in between worked and out, because remember, this one is separable. Here's one more example. In any relationship, people need to work out their problems by communicating clearly and listening to each other. So this simply means people need to fix or solve their problems. And note here that we've got work and out together. So work out is great for talking about solving problems, but just be careful because work out can also mean to exercise. For example, I work out regularly to stay healthy. Now let's move on to the next one, which is phrasal verb number 10, which is grow up. Grow up means to become older and more mature. Is it separable? No, this one is not separable. Does it need an object? No, this one does not. It is intransitive. Synonyms: get older, become an adult. Collocations: grow up in a small town. So that means you probably start as a child in the town and then you become older and more mature in that small town. Grow up quickly and grow up with someone. Here are some examples. I grew up in a small town near the mountains and it was really peaceful. So note here we have got the two words together. And also note that when you're using phrasal verbs, you need to think about the tense. So with this example, we have said grew because we're talking about the past. Because remember, the first part of a phrasal verb is just a normal verb. Here is the second one. Children who grow up in big cities often become more independent at an earlier age. The first thing we need to talk about is what an idiom actually is. So an idiom is a group of words with a meaning that's different from the literal meaning of each word. So for example, hit the books doesn't mean physically hitting or punching books. It means to study hard. So idioms are very common in spoken English and they can help you sound more natural in the IELTS speaking test. So now let's have a look at some examples. Let's start with the first one, which is cost an arm and a leg. Now, if something costs an arm and a leg, do you think that thing is expensive or cheap? Correct, it's probably expensive because your arms and your legs are very important. So that is the meaning of this idiom. It simply means to be very expensive, to cost a lot of money. Now let me show you how you can use this idiom for a question in IELTS speaking. So let's pretend that the examiner says, is there anything you don't like about the area where you live? Well, you could say something like this. Yeah, the rent is probably the worst part. It's a fantastic area which has everything I need, but honestly, it costs an arm and a leg just to live in a small apartment. Plus, my rent keeps going up every year, so I'm considering ... So, when the speaker says costs an arm and a leg just to live in a small apartment, that means the rent is very expensive. And after that, the speaker says the rent keeps going up as well. Now, when it comes to the pronunciation of this idiom, we don't say cost an arm and a leg. All of the sounds come together. So we say cost an arm and a leg, cost an arm and a leg. So for example, my rent costs an arm and a leg, costs an arm and a leg. Now, so this idiom is a great idiom to use if you're talking about something that's really expensive. Only use this idiom when something is really expensive, not just a little bit expensive. So, for example, if your coffee goes up by 50 cents, that's not an arm and a leg. But if you have to pay, $2,000 for your new phone, okay, then yes, this would be a good time to use an arm and a leg. Now let's move on to the second idiom, which is a piece of cake. Now you might have heard this one before because it's a very common idiom. This one simply means to be very easy or simple to do. Now, this one comes from the idea that eating cake is very easy and enjoyable. So when something is a piece of cake, it means that thing is very simple or even effortless to do. So now let's have a look at how we can use this idiom for a real answer in IELTS speaking. Let's pretend that the examiner says, "Are you good at using technology?" Well, you could say something like, "Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty good with it. I grew up using computers and smartphones, so most tech stuff is a piece of cake for me." So this is simply saying most technology is very easy. Even when I get a new device, I can usually figure it out without needing help or reading the manual. So just remember, if something is super easy, whether it's a subject, a task, or even a test, you can say it's a piece of cake. But don't use it for things that are just a little bit easy. All right, let's move on to idiom number 3 now, which is once in a blue moon. Now, this idiom means something that happens very rarely. Now, you might be thinking, what is a blue moon? Well, a blue moon is the name for a second full moon in a single calendar month. And that happens very rarely, probably once every 2 to 3 years. So that's why the phrase once in a blue moon came to mean something that happens very rarely. So now let's use this idiom in an answer to an IELTS speaking question. Let's pretend the examiner says, "How often do you eat out at restaurants?" Well, you could say something like this: "Not very often, maybe once in a blue moon." So this simply means it's very rare that I eat out at restaurants. I usually cook at home because it's much more affordable and much healthier. But if there's a special occasion or I'm meeting friends, I'll definitely go out for a nice meal. So this is a great idiom to use to talk about things that you rarely do. Now, it could be anything. It could be going out, it could be seeing someone, or even eating a certain type of food. Let's move on to the fourth idiom now, which is pull someone's leg. Now, this one means to joke or to tease someone in a playful way. Now, note with this idiom, it's used to talk about a situation that isn't serious. So let's pretend that the examiner says, "When was the last time something made you laugh?" Well, you could say something like this: "Actually, just a few days ago, my friend told me this ridiculous story about how he got lost in his own neighborhood, but then I realized he was just pulling my leg." So that simply means he was just joking in a very playful way and he wasn't being serious. Now, note with this idiom that pull is a verb. So when we're using it in a real sentence, we have to think about the tense. We have to think about the grammar. And that's why in this one, we have said pulling, not pull. Because when we have the verb to be, we normally need a verb ing. So always just be aware of that. So just remember that this idiom is used when someone is just joking about something or trying to trick you in a fun way. It's not used to describe serious lies or arguments. All right, let's move on to idiom number 5, which is think outside the box. So let's pretend that you're trying to think of something and you're only thinking within this box, within this area. Do you think you're thinking creatively or not creatively? Well, probably not creatively. So think outside the box. If you go outside that box, well, that means to think in a creative or a different way, to think in a way that's not just the normal or the obvious way. So let's pretend that the examiner says to you something like, do you think creativity is important in the workplace? Now, this is probably more like a part 3 question. So you could say something like this. Definitely, in many jobs, you need to think outside the box to solve problems or to come up with new ideas, especially in areas like marketing or design. So this is simply saying that in many jobs, you need to think creatively. You can't just use a very basic or normal way of thinking. You need to be innovative. You need to be creative. You need to think differently. So the next time you want to describe someone being creative or doing something in a new way, just say they know how to think outside the box. It's a great idiom to use. All right, let's move on to idiom number 6, which is on the same page. Now, just think about this for a second. If two people are on the same page, if they are reading the same page in a book, what do you think that could mean? Well, the meaning is to agree or to think the same way about something as someone else. So if two people are on the same page, that means they agree or they think the same way about a certain topic or thing. So let's pretend the examiner says, is it important to communicate well in the workplace? Well, you could say something like this. And by the way, this would probably also be a part 3 question. So you could say, definitely, good communication helps make sure everyone's on the same page. So this means if people are talking, if they are communicating, this can help to make sure everyone is thinking the same thing or the same way about a certain topic. If people don't understand the plan or goal, it's very easy for mistakes to happen, and this could also lead to ... and then you would continue your answer. So use this idiom when you want to say that you and someone else agree or understand things the same way. It's great for topics like teamwork and relationships. All right, let's move on to idiom number 7 now, which is go the extra mile. So just think about this. If you go the extra mile, if you walk an extra mile, if you run an extra mile, what could that mean about you? Well, the meaning is to make more effort than expected or to do more than what is required. So if someone goes the extra mile, they are doing more than is necessary. They go past what is necessary. So let's pretend that the examiner says, what qualities make someone a good employee? And again, this would probably be a part 3 question. So you could say something like this. I think one important quality is being willing to go the extra mile. So that simply means, if necessary, you will make more effort than is required. You will do more than what is required. So for example, finishing your tasks properly is good, but someone who stays a bit longer or helps others really stands out and makes themselves someone that others would want to work with. So if you want to describe someone who really puts in the effort, or if that person is you, this is the perfect idiom to use. Let's move on to idiom number 8 now, which is the ball is in your court. Now just pretend that you are playing tennis and someone hits the ball to you. The ball is in your court. What could this mean? What could this be talking about? Well, the meaning is it's your turn to make a decision or to take action. Because think about it, if the ball is in your court when you're playing tennis, it's your turn to hit the ball back. It's your turn to take action. Let's pretend the examiner says, is it important to be honest in a relationship? Now, this would be a part 3 question as well. So you could say something like this. Yes, I think honesty is key, or honesty is very important. If you're open and tell the truth, then the ball is in the other person's court. So this simply means it's the other person's turn to make a decision or take action. So you can see here that we don't have to say your court. We can change your and use anything. We could say something like his court, her court. Or like we've done here, we have said the other person's court. It's up to them how they want to respond. And honestly, that's all you can do. Be clear and honest. After that, it's ... and then you continue your answer. So you can use this idiom when it's someone else's turn to decide or take action. You could even use this one to say the ball's in my court to talk about yourself. Let's move on to the next idiom now, which is bite the bullet. Now just think about this. You've got a bullet and you bite it. What could that possibly mean? Well, the meaning is to do something difficult or unpleasant that you've been avoiding. Because just think about it, biting a bullet, it's probably not going to be very fun and not very pleasant. Now, this idiom comes from old wartime medicine where soldiers would literally bite on a bullet during surgery if there were no drugs or no medicine available. Now, let's have a look at how we can put this into an answer. Have you ever had to do something you didn't want to do? Well, you could say something like this. Yes, recently I had to go to the dentist after putting it off for months. If you put something off, that means you keep delaying it. You keep saying, no, I'm not going to do it today. I will do it later. I really hate going, but the pain got worse, so I had to bite the bullet and just make an appointment. So if you say something like this, that you had to bite the bullet and go to the dentist, well, that means for you, going to the dentist is something unpleasant and you don't really like it and you've been avoiding it. You've been putting it off. So you can use this one when you have to do something hard, but you know it must be done. Now, please note that when you're saying this one, you need to stress bite. So you would say bite the bullet, not bite the bullet. Okay, so remember, we stress the word bite the bullet. All right, let's move on to idiom number 10 now, which is a blessing in disguise. Now, a blessing is a good thing, and a disguise is something that tries to hide something. What do you think that could mean? Well, the meaning of this idiom is something that seems bad at first. It looks bad at first, but it turns out to be good later. And in life, this often happens. Things happen that look bad, but later it turns out that this thing that actually happened had a positive result or was good. So let's pretend the examiner gives you this topic for part 2. Describe a time when something didn't go as planned. Well, you could have something like this in your answer. Last year, I didn't get the internship I applied for. I was really disappointed at the time, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So this is saying, I didn't get the internship, so I thought it was bad, but it was actually a good thing. A few weeks later, I found a much better opportunity that helped me learn more and ... So this is a great example of where you could use a blessing in disguise. Something negative happens and you think it's negative for a few weeks, and then later something good happens. And then you realize it was actually good that you didn't get that internship. So use this idiom when something goes wrong, but it ends up being a good thing at the end. All right, let's get started with the very first one, which is very big. This is obviously very commonly used by lower level students, very big. So instead of saying very big, you could use the word massive. Massive simply means very big, and it's a little bit casual, so you probably wouldn't use it in the writing test. So for example, there's a very big shopping center. No, you could say there's a massive shopping center near my house, which is always packed with shoppers. And when you say the word massive, you need to put some energy into it. So you wouldn't say there's a massive shopping center. You need to put some energy into that word. There's a massive shopping center near my house. ... Now, another word you can use is huge. Now, huge is mainly used in spoken English because it's quite informal and it means very big again. So look at this example. My university is very big. Well, no, we could say my university is huge. I heard it has over 40,000 students and several campuses. And again, when you're using the word huge, you need to put some energy into it. Don't just say, my university is huge. Okay, put some energy, put some emotion into it. Let's move on to the next one, which is very tired. This is also another very common piece of vocabulary that lower level students use. So instead of saying very tired, you can use the word exhausted. Okay, this is a great alternative for very tired, and we use it to describe when you have no energy left. So for example, I was very tired after my first day of work. Well, no, we could say I was exhausted after my first day of work, so I went to bed as soon as I got home. This is going to make your speaking sound much more professional. Another one you can use is drained. Okay, drained is a great alternative you can use, and it means mentally or physically very tired when you've got no energy left. So many students feel very tired. No, many students feel drained during exam time because of all the pressure and all the hours of study. Another common one is very happy. Well, instead of saying very happy, you could say thrilled. Thrilled simply means extremely happy and excited, and you can mainly use it when something exciting happens. So for example, I was very happy. No, I was thrilled when I found out I had passed the IELTS exam with a band 7.5. Now just think about that for a second. If you get a band 7.5 in your IELTS test, how would you feel? Obviously very happy, very excited, probably about the future. So this is a great example of when you could use thrilled and the sort of feeling that you would feel if you were thrilled. Now just be careful, because there's a TH at the start, so make sure you pronounce that correctly instead of saying trilled, trilled with just a T sound. Now, another alternative you can use is on cloud 9. This next one is an idiom, and you can use it again when you're extremely happy or very excited. Because this is an idiom, you should only use it in speaking, not writing. So for example, most people feel very happy. No, most people feel on cloud 9 when they first get into a relationship because everything feels exciting and new. So just picture that for a second. You're in a new relationship with someone you really, really like. Well, again, you're probably going to feel very happy. So we could use the idiom there, on cloud 9. Let's move on to number 4, which is very beautiful. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of different ways to say very beautiful, but a very common one is stunning. You can use it to describe people, places, or even things. So it's not just to describe people. So for example, my cousin is a model. She's very beautiful. Well, no, we could say my cousin is a model. She's absolutely stunning and always stands out at family events. Now that word there, absolutely, that just means very. So we're making the word stunning even stronger. Absolutely stunning instead of just stunning. Now another one you can use is gorgeous. Now this one is mainly used to talk about people or clothes, but sometimes it can be used to talk about scenery. So for example, a very beautiful piece of nature or a beautiful landscape. So she wore a very beautiful traditional dress. Well, no, we could say she wore a gorgeous traditional dress to the ceremony and everyone was complimenting her. Let's move on to number 5, which is very cold. So instead of just saying very cold, you could use the word freezing. Freezing simply means very cold, and it's a really good one to use when you're talking about the weather. So for example, I visited Canada in the winter and it was very cold. Well, no, we could say I visited Canada and it was freezing. I had to wear 3 layers just to go outside. Another word you can use is icy. Okay, this means very cold and can also mean when something is literally covered in ice or when there actually is ice. So for example, in my country, the mornings are very cold. Well, no, we could say in my country, the mornings are icy during winter, especially in the mountains. So you can see that when you use words like freezing or icy, it's more descriptive. It really describes the feeling of what you're trying to say. So just think about it. If you're talking about the weather and the weather is icy, that really describes the situation more instead of just saying very cold. Let's move on to number 6, which is very good. Now, there are obviously lots of different words you can use to describe something or someone that's very good, but the first one that I recommend you use is excellent. It's a very natural word to use in speaking, and it means extremely good or of the highest quality. So, for example, the teacher I had in high school was very good. Or no, we could say the teacher I had in high school was excellent. She explained things clearly and really cared about her students. Now, apart from excellent, you could use the word fantastic. Again, it simply means very good or enjoyable. So let's look at this example. We had a very good time. Well, no, we had a fantastic time on our trip to Japan. I mean, the food and the culture were amazing. Now let's move on to number 7, which is very bad. We've obviously talked about very good, so now let's talk about very bad. The first alternative you can use is awful. Okay, so for example, the traffic in my city is very bad during rush hour. Well, no, we could say the traffic in my city is awful during rush hour. Awful simply means very bad. It can take over an hour to travel just a few kilometers. Now, another one you can use is horrendous. Okay, horrendous. It means very bad or very unpleasant. So, for example, the weather during our holiday was very bad. Well, no, we could say the weather during our holiday was horrendous. It rained every day and we couldn't do any of the outdoor activities we had planned. So, if the weather was horrendous, yeah, it probably means it was raining a lot. Maybe it was very cloudy. Maybe there was a storm. Maybe there was lightning, thunder. Okay, horrendous means very bad. And just going back to what we said about the traffic being awful, you could also use horrendous to describe traffic. So you could say something like, the traffic in the morning is horrendous. Okay, that simply means very bad. Let's move on to number 8, which is very boring. The first word you can use instead of very boring is dull. Okay, dull means not interesting or not exciting. It's a really great word you can use for a lot of different things, including people or books or just even different activities. So the lecture was very boring. Well, no, we could say the lecture was dull. So I found it hard to concentrate after the first 10 minutes. And this is what a lot of students would say. They would say very boring, especially lower level students. But a higher level student would use something like dull. Again, it's more descriptive, it's more colorful, it's more interesting than saying very plus adjective. Next one is tedious. Okay, tedious is also a great word to use. It means boring because something takes a long time or has a lot of repetition where you have to do the same thing again and again and again. So if we look at this example, filling out visa applications can be very boring. Well, no, we could replace that with tedious. So filling out visa applications can be pretty tedious, especially when there are so many small details to check. So if you have to fill out applications, you have to keep doing the same thing again. You have to keep filling in the information or writing your information. So it can be tedious because you're repeating something that's not very interesting. Moving on to number 9 now, which is very difficult. So the first one you can use is challenging. Okay, challenging can mean difficult in a way that tests your ability or effort. Now, it's really good for describing things that are hard but rewarding. But just be careful. If something is challenging, it might not always be hard. It might just take a lot of time and effort. So, for example, preparing for the IELTS speaking test was very difficult. Well, no, we could say preparing for the test was challenging, but it helped me to improve my fluency. Another one you can use is demanding. Okay, demanding means requiring a lot of time or effort or attention. So, for example, being a medical student can be very difficult. So instead of saying very difficult, we could say demanding. Being a medical student can be demanding. You have to study for long hours every day. Let's move on to number 10, which is very small. The first word you can use instead of very small is tiny. Okay, tiny simply means very small, and it's a very common and very natural word in everyday conversation. Now, you can use it when you're describing spaces, objects, or even differences. So, my apartment is very small. No, my apartment is tiny, but it's enough for one person and easy to keep clean. So yeah, we're simply saying the apartment is very small. Now, if you want to say something is smaller than tiny, you can use this word right here. Now have a look, and how do you think you pronounce it? Well, no, it's not minute like time, okay, not minute. It's pronounced minute. Minute, okay, not minute, but minute. So this one means very, very small. And like I said, it's even smaller than tiny. So let me show you an example. In scientific research, even a very small error will know. We could say in scientific research, even a minute error. And remember, minute. Okay, minute error in measurement can affect the results. So accuracy is quite important. So just remember, minute is smaller than tiny, and it's a great word to use when you're talking about something really, really, really small. The first thing we need to talk about is what is a synonym? Well, a synonym is a word that has the same or similar meaning as another word. So that's the key. It's the same meaning or a similar meaning. So let's get started with the first word, which is person. Obviously, person is a very common word that a lot of students use. So instead of saying person, you could use the word individual. This just means a single human being. So, for example, the person decided to pursue a career overseas. No, we could say the individual decided to pursue a career overseas. Now, please note, you can't use this one in casual expressions or casual conversation. So, for example, you wouldn't say a nice individual, you'd have to say a nice person. Let's move on to the second word now, which is people. So we've talked about person, that's one. People is two or more, so more than one. Well, instead of saying people, you could say the general public or the public. The general public means the general population or society as a whole. So it's talking about society. It's not talking about, one small group of 5 or 10 people. So, for example, people should be educated about environmental issues. Well, in this case, we're talking about, people in society, all of society. So we could say the general public should be educated about environmental issues. So this is a great one to use when you're talking in general about most people in society. But remember, it's not just for a few people, like a small group, like 5 or 10 people. Let's move on to word number 3, which is very or really. This is a very, I even just said it then, it's a very common word in English. So instead of using very or really, you can use the word incredibly. For example, the results were very difficult to understand. No, we could say something like, The results were incredibly difficult to understand. Now, just remember, when you're using this one, you normally need to put some stress on the word. So you would say the results were incredibly difficult to understand, but you wouldn't say the results were incredibly difficult to understand. You've got to put some stress, you've got to put some energy into your speech when you're using this one. Let's move on to the next one, which is word 4. Word number 4 is say, another very, very common word. Instead of saying say, you could say state. State means to express something clearly in speaking or writing. So for example, the report says that pollution levels have increased. Okay, fair enough. Well, instead, we could say the report states that pollution levels have increased. Now, you could even use this to say something like, as I stated earlier, and then say what you said, because a lot of students in the speaking test, if they want to refer back to what they said, they'll say something like, as I said earlier, but a more professional way would be to say, as I stated earlier. Let's move on to word number 5, which is tell, another very common one. So instead of tell, you can use the word inform. So inform just means to give someone facts or to give someone information about something. The school told parents about the exam changes. Well, no, we could say the school informed parents about the exam changes. So this is saying the school gave information to parents about the exam changes. Now for this one, please note that we don't use it in casual expressions. So for example, we wouldn't say something like inform a story. No, we would have to say tell a story. Let's move on to the next one, which is word number 6. Sometimes before you are told something, before you receive information, you need to ask a question. And that is our next word, ask. So instead of saying ask, you could use the word inquire, because inquire means to ask for information formally. So for example, the applicant asked about the job position. No, we could say the applicant inquired about the job position. So they are formally asking for information about the job position. Just be careful with this one, because we would not say inquire a question. We would say ask a question. Remember, inquire is all about asking for information formally. Let's move on to word number 7, which is help, another very common one. So instead of just saying help, you could use the word assist. Assist just means help, but it's a more formal alternative. So governments should help low-income families with housing costs. Or no, we could say governments should assist low-income families with housing costs. So if you're thinking about saying help, try using the word assist. It's going to make your speaking and even your writing sound much more professional. Okay, let's talk about word number 8 now, which is famous. A lot of people think of the word popular as a synonym for the word famous, but this is not right, because famous means many people know you, whereas popular means many people like you. So there's a slight difference there. So when you're thinking about famous, don't use the word popular, okay? It's not a suitable synonym. What is a suitable synonym is well-known. Well-known means exactly what it says. It means it's known by many people. For example, she's a famous expert in environmental science. No, we could say she's a well-known expert in environmental science. So again, this is going to make your speaking or your writing sound much more professional. And well-known, it's just something that most lower level candidates wouldn't use. So it's going to make you sound like you have a higher level of vocabulary. Moving on to word number 9, which is mostly. Mostly is another common one. Instead of mostly, you could use the word predominantly. I know it's a long one, but it's a very nice word to use. Predominantly. It's a great word, and it simply means mostly or mainly. So for example, the participants were mostly young adults. So that means most of the people who were there were young adults. Or instead of saying mostly, we could say the participants were predominantly young adults. Predominantly. Now, you could even use this word to talk about yourself. For example, my diet is predominantly vegetarian, although I occasionally eat meat. Okay, moving on to word number 10. So in the IELTS speaking test, you might get asked about where you live. So instead of saying live, you could say the word or use the word reside. Now, listen to that pronunciation, reside, reside. That S sound actually sounds like a Z sound. So here's an example. Many students live near the university campus. Well, instead of saying live, you could say many students reside near the university campus. Moving on to word number 11 now, which is try. Instead of saying try, you could use the word attempt. So for example, I tried to solve the issue before the meeting. No, you could say I attempted to solve the issue before the meeting. Now this sounds much more professional and formal than just saying try. Moving on to word number 12, which is change. Obviously, change is a very common word. So instead of saying change, you could use the word alter. Now, please note that with alter, it's normally used to talk about a small adjustment or a small change, not something major, not something big. For example, the schedule was changed due to bad weather conditions. Well, no, we could say the schedule was altered due to bad weather conditions. Now, note here, when we're talking about a schedule, it's probably not going to be a big change, and that's why we can use the word alter. Moving on to 13, or word 13, which is think. Think is a very common word that's, pretty much all students use in the speaking test. And there's nothing wrong with using the word think sometimes, but you should try to use some alternatives as well, so you can show the examiner you have a wide range of vocabulary. So instead of saying think, you can use the word consider. Consider means to think about something carefully, normally when you're going to make a decision or when you're forming an opinion about something. For example, they must think about the consequences before making a decision. Well, we could say we must consider the consequences before making a decision. And note here that when we use consider, we don't say about. We just say consider and then the topic. So for example, consider the consequences. We would not say consider about the consequences. Moving on to word 14, which is get. Now, an alternative for get or a synonym for get is receive. So for example, students get a confirmation email after registration. Well, no, we could say students receive a confirmation email after registration. Now, just be careful because we don't use receive with casual expressions like, get up or get along. So for example, we wouldn't say receive up or receive along. That would be incorrect. You need to say get up or get along. Moving to 15, which is easy. Instead of saying easy, you can say simple. Simple means not difficult or not complicated to do or understand. For example, it's an easy process that takes only 10 minutes. Or instead of saying that, we could use the word simple. It's a simple process that takes only 10 minutes. Simple is going to make you sound more natural because easy is obviously a very, very, very common word. Moving to word 16 now, which is extra. Okay, instead of using extra, you can use the word additional. Additional simply means more than what is usual or expected. For example, extra training was provided after the course ended. Well, instead of saying extra, we could say additional training. Additional training was provided after the course ended. Moving to word 17, which is talk about. This is a very common one that people use, and I don't really hear many people using synonyms or alternatives for this one. So instead of saying talk about, you can use the word discuss. Discuss means to talk or even to write about something in detail. So not just to talk about it quickly, but to talk about it or write about it in detail. For example, the report talks about several possible solutions to the problem. Well, no, we could say the report discusses several possible solutions to the problem. Now, we're using discuss here because the report probably goes into detail about those solutions to the problem. Now, when it comes to more casual situations where you could use chat or talk, you probably wouldn't use the word discuss because remember, discuss means to talk about something in detail. Moving to 18 or word 18, which is food. Okay, everyone's favorite, food. Instead of saying food, you could use the word cuisine. Cuisine means a style or a type of cooking, especially from a particular country. So just be careful. Cuisine doesn't have exactly the same meaning as food. Cuisine means a style or a type of cooking. So just be aware of that. So for example, Thai food is popular around the world. Well, to make that more professional, we could say Thai cuisine is popular around the world. Now, just be careful because we can't always use cuisine instead of food. So for example, we couldn't say I like fast cuisine or junk cuisine. No, we'd have to say fast food or junk food. Moving to word 19 now, which is tip. Now, tip in this situation is referring to advice. So a synonym here is recommendation, because recommendation means a suggestion or a piece of advice about what to do. So let's pretend the example is he gave several tips for improving the essay. Well, no, we could say he gave several recommendations for improving the essay. Just be careful though with this one because we don't use the word recommendation instead of tip if we're talking about money. So for example, if you're at a restaurant and you want to give the waiter some money, you would need to say or use the word tip. You wouldn't say, can I give you a recommendation? This wouldn't be correct. Moving to the next word now, which is word 20, go up. Instead of saying go up, we could say increase. Okay, this is just a more professional way to say go up. For example, prices went up. Obviously, went is verb 2 for go. Went up sharply during the last quarter. Well, no, we could say prices increased sharply during the last quarter. Note with the pronunciation, we don't say increased. No, when we're using increased in the past, we need to pronounce that SED as an ST. So increased with that T sound at the end. So increase is not the most advanced word in the world, and that's fine, but it's just going to make your speaking and writing sound more professional instead of just saying go up. Moving on to word 21 now. Obviously, the opposite of go up is go down. So instead of saying go down, well, you could say decrease. For example, the unemployment rate went down over the past year. Well, no, we could say the unemployment rate decreased over the past year. Again, decreased, it's not the most advanced word in the world, but it's just going to make your writing or your speaking sound more professional. Your vocabulary is going to sound more professional. Moving on to word number 22, which is fix. Instead of saying fix, you could use the word resolve because resolve means to find a solution to a problem. Now make sure that when you say that V sound, you voice that sound. So your throat should vibrate, okay? Resolve with that V sound. For example, the government must fix the housing crisis. Well, no, we could say the government must resolve the housing crisis. Let's talk about word number 23 now, which is about. So an alternative for about means approximately, and approximately means close to a particular amount, but not exactly. For example, the journey takes about 2 hours. Well, instead of saying about 2 hours, we could say the journey takes approximately 2 hours. So this is a great word for writing task 1 when you're describing data, but you're not sure about the exact number. Okay, moving on to word number 24, which is end. Now, this is when we're using end as a verb, not as a noun. So instead of saying end, we could say conclude. For example, the presentation ended with a summary of key points, or the presentation finished with a summary. So we could say the presentation concluded with a summary of key points. So this is a great word you can use when you want to finish off your writing task 2 essay. You can say to conclude, comma, ... and then you write your conclusion. Moving on to word 25, which is important. This is a very common word that is very overused in IELTS speaking and writing. Now, there are many different alternatives for important, but a very simple one is crucial. Crucial means extremely important or essential, so something that is necessary. For example, it's important to address climate change immediately. Well, we could say it's crucial to address climate change immediately. Now, just remember that crucial is stronger than important, and it means something that is essential or necessary. Moving on to 26 now, which is problem. Also another very common word which is often overused. Instead of saying problem, you can say issue. Okay, problem and issue have a very similar meaning, but issue is just a bit more professional. Traffic congestion is a major problem in large cities. Well, instead of saying that, we could say traffic congestion is a major issue in large cities. And just in regards to the word major, note how that we have said major and not big. A lot of students would say a big problem, but no, that's not very professional. That's very basic. So we could use the word major. Now, just going back to issue, issue is slightly more formal than problem. So it's a great word to use, particularly in speaking part 3, if you get questions about certain problems or negative things in the world. You could even use this one in writing task 2 as well. Moving on to 27 now, which is answer. Now, this is when answer is used as a noun. So instead of saying answer, you could use the synonym response. Now, if answer is a verb, we could use respond as a synonym because respond is a verb, but response with the S, okay, is a noun. Her answer to the question was well structured. Well, no, instead of saying that, we could say her response to the question was well structured. Now, you could even use this one to talk about governments. For example, the government's response has not had much effect. Moving on to 28, which is rich. Okay, rich is another very overused word if you want to say someone has a lot of money. So instead of saying rich, you could say wealthy. Wealthy simply means having a large amount of money, property, or things. For example, rich individuals often invest in international education. Well, no, to make that more professional, we could say wealthy individuals often invest in international education. So this is a great alternative to use instead of rich. It's going to make your speaking and your writing sound much, much better. Word 29 now, which is job. Job is a great word and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a very basic word. So instead of saying job, you could use the word occupation. Occupation is talking about a person's regular work or job. It's not talking about just one job you have to do, like doing some homework or cooking dinner. Well, no, we wouldn't use occupation here. His job involves a lot of international travel. Well, no, we could say his occupation involves a lot of international travel. Moving on to word number 30 now, which is idea. Instead of saying idea, you could use the word concept. So concept just means a general thought or a general idea about something. So for example, the idea of free education is widely supported. Well, no, instead of saying that, we could say the concept of free education is widely supported. So you can use this one in speaking part 3 or even in writing task 2 when you're talking about certain ideas rather than physical things that you can actually touch. I've got 20 words. If you know them all, you're probably a band 9 in IELTS vocabulary. That means your vocabulary is better than 97% of IELTS test takers around the world. So, do you think you're a band 9? Let's find out. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to show you a word and give you 3 possible meanings. Your job is to choose the best answer. We'll start off easy and slowly work our way up to the more difficult words. So here's number 1. Increase. Increase. Does this mean grow, break, or hide? To increase means to grow or become larger in amount. The number of students increased after the new program started. Word number 2, follow. Follow. Does this mean go after, pick up, or change? To follow means to go after someone or something, usually by moving behind them. The students followed the teacher into the next room. Word number 3, advice. Does this mean location, tool, or suggestion? Advice means a suggestion about what someone should do. She gave me some useful advice before the interview. Word number 4, improve. Improve. Does this mean fall down, get better, or get lost? To improve means to get better or become more effective. Her English improved after just 3 weeks of practice. Word number 5, common. Common. Does this mean expensive, usual, or large? Common means something that happens often or is normal. It's common to feel nervous before your IELTS speaking test. So they were the easy ones. I hope you got them all right. Let's move on to some words which are a little bit more difficult now. Word number 6, require. Require. Does this mean guess, remove, or need? To require means to need something, often because it's necessary or expected. The course requires students to complete all assignments. Word number 7, benefit. Benefit. Does this mean advantage, danger, or process? A benefit is something good or helpful. Exercise has many benefits for your health. Word number 8, limit. Limit. Does this mean free gift, maximum amount, or main reason? A limit is the maximum amount allowed in a situation. There's a limit to how many people can join. Word number 9, achieve. Achieve. Does this mean complete, delay, or destroy? To achieve means to complete a goal or finish something successfully. She achieved her goal after months of hard work. Word number 10, aware. Aware. Does this mean fully awake, knows about something, or feeling scared? To be aware means to know that something is true or happening. For example, he's aware of the risks but wants to continue. So, congratulations, you've completed 10 words. Now we're going to move on to 5 advanced words. Are you ready? Let's go. Word number 11, justify. Justify. Does this mean explain clearly, copy someone, or change topic? To justify means to explain clearly why something is right or reasonable. He tried to justify his decision to skip the meeting. Word number 12, evaluate. Evaluate. Does this mean give money, judge carefully, or argue strongly? To evaluate means to look at something carefully and decide how good or useful it is. The company will evaluate each candidate before making a decision. Word number 13, decline. Decline. Does this mean go down, speed up, or wait longer? To decline means to go down or become lower. The number of tourists declined after the storm. Word number 14, reliable. Reliable. Does this mean hard to find, looks expensive, or can be trusted? Reliable means someone or something you can trust or depend on. She's a reliable person who always finishes her work on time. Word number 15, emphasize. Emphasize. Does this mean speak softly, show importance, or ask questions? To emphasize means to show that something is important so people pay more attention to it. The teacher emphasized the need to study every day. Well done on getting this far. Now it's time for the final 5, the hardest words in the quiz. Let's see how good your vocab really is. Number 16, meticulous. Meticulous. Does this mean very fast, very careful, or not honest? To be meticulous means to be very careful and pay close attention to small details. She's always meticulous when checking her writing for mistakes. Word number 17, inevitable. Inevitable. Does this mean very common, impossible to stop, or easy to guess? If something is inevitable, it means it will definitely happen and you can't stop it. It was inevitable that prices would rise after the announcement. Word number 18, articulate. Articulate. Does this mean easily confused, very busy, or well spoken? If someone is articulate, they are well spoken and can explain their thoughts and ideas very clearly. She's highly intelligent and very articulate in her speech. Word number 19, ambiguous. Ambiguous. Does this mean very clear, hard to remember, or having more than one meaning? Ambiguous means something that isn't clear and could be understood in more than one way. The question was ambiguous and confused many students. Word number 20, prevalent. Prevalent. Does this mean very common, very recent, or very fast? Prevalent means very common or something that happens often or is found in many places. Online learning has become more prevalent in recent years. All right, take a look at this table. This shows your vocabulary level, depending on how many questions you got right.